Welcome to the Awesome Conference presented by Autism Canada. This is Julie from Autism Canada, and I'm so excited to be with you today. We are overwhelmed and grateful for the support from our community and are so excited to be able to share these incredible presentations with you. Before we get started, there are a few items we're going to have to take care of, but I promise we're going to get down to business right away. Thanks for being here and enjoy the day.
Bienvenue à la conférence d'Autism présentée par Autisme Canada. Nous sommes très touchés et reconnaissants du soutien de notre communauté et sommes fiers de partager cette présentation avec vous. Avant de commencer, il y a quelques éléments à terminer. Mais dès que cela sera réglé, nous commencerons la présentation.
Autism Canada would like to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. While we meet today on a virtual platform, we would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands we call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home. Please join us in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and to consider how we are and can each, in our own way, move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration.
Autisme Canada tient à reconnaître les peuples autochtones de tous les terres où nous nous trouvons aujourd'hui. Alors que nous réunissons aujourd'hui sur une plateforme virtuelle, nous aimerions prendre un moment pour reconnaître l'importance des terres que nous appelons chez nous. Nous le faisons pour réaffirmer notre engagement et notre responsabilité à améliorer les relations entre les nations et à améliorer notre propre compréhension des peuples autochtones locaux et de leur culture. D'un océan à l'autre, nous reconnaissons le territoire ancestral et non cédé de tous les Inuits, des Métis et des Premières Nations qui habitent cette terre. Veuillez vous joindre à nous dans un moment de réflexion pour reconnaître les torts, les erreurs du passé et pour réfléchir à la façon dont nous pouvons tous, à notre façon, essayer d'aller de l'avant dans un esprit de réconciliation et de collaboration.
This year, 2021, Autism Canada is proud to be celebrating 45 years of standing with and supporting the autism community in Canada.
Célébrer 45 ans de soutien à la communauté de l'autisme au Canada de 1976 en 2021.
This year, Awesome Conference is sponsored by
La conférence Awesome est parrainée par
BCGEU, the BC General Employees Union, Cormark Securities Inc., Novatech, Rangam, Public Label, and our media partner, Daily Hive. We'd like to welcome BCGEU the BC General Employees Union back as a presenting awesome sponsor this year. BCGEU is a strong and long-time supporter of Autism Canada, and we are so grateful for their support. The BCGEU is one of the largest and most diverse unions in British Columbia. They represent over 80,000 members in 550 bargaining units in the private sector and public services. The union is also proud to represent thousands of members in healthcare, community social services, education, highways maintenance, casinos, credit unions, municipalities, regional districts, and other employers.
Nous souhaitons la bienvenue à BCGEU en tant que commanditaire présentateur d'Autism Canada cette année. Le BCGEU est un partisan de longue date d'Autism Canada et nous sommes très fiers et reconnaissants pour leur soutien. Le BCGEU est l'un des syndicats les plus importants et les plus diversifiés de la Colombie-Britannique. Nous représentons plus de 80 000 membres dans 550 unités de négociation du secteur privé et des services publics. Notre syndicat est également fier de représenter des milliers de membres dans le domaine de la santé, des services sociaux communautaires, de l'éducation, de services d'entretien des routes, des casinos, des coopératives de crédit, des municipalités, des districts régionaux et d'autres employeurs et employeuses.
Here's today's order of events. Wanda Deschamps, Keynote. William Caruna, Keeping Your Head Above Water in Post-Secondary Education. Kim Souch and Sara Sobey, How Music Created a Bridge for a Mother and Daughter on the Spectrum. Kieran Rose, Autistic, Masking, and Burnout. Michael Tanzer, a reading from Michaelism, My POV on Life with Autism. Minni, a conversation about employment and hiring practices. Petherick, How to Deal with Authority Figures. And Sam and Anthony Holness, Raising Autism Awareness Through Sport.
Voici l'ordre des événements du jour. Conférenciers et conférencières et sujets. Wanda Deschamps, conférencière principale. William Caruna, gardez votre tête hors de l'eau dans vos études postsecondaires. Kim Souch et Sara Sobey, comment la musique a renforcé une relation entre une mère et sa fille sur le spectre. Kieran Rose, le masquage autistique et l'épuisement autistique. Michael Tanzer, une lecture de Michaelism, My POV on Life with Autism. Minni, parler des pratiques d'emploi et d'embauche. Petherick, comment gérer les figures d'autorité. Et Sam et Anthony Holness, la sensibilisation à l'autisme par le sport.
Hi, my name is Paul Finch, and I'm a board director with Autism Canada and the current treasurer and chief financial officer of the BC General Employees Union, or BCGU. Most importantly, I'm diagnosed on the autism spectrum. Today I'm speaking to you from Burnaby on the traditional and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. The BCGU is a proud and longtime sponsor of Autism Canada's Awesome Conference. Our union is committed to equity and inclusion in the workplace and our communities. And supporting organizations like Autism Canada is part of that commitment. I want to welcome back those attendees who have joined us before, and to those who are with us for the first time, I hope you not only enjoy the day, but come away feeling understood and supported. I'm proud to be a part of today, as this conference is written and presented solely by those on the autism spectrum. It's a day where we hear personal insights and accomplishments, and it's part of the long overdue journey to widespread acceptance, understanding, and inclusion. Before we start, I'd like to thank our sponsors for their commitment to the autism community in Canada. The BCGU, Comark Securities, Public Label, Novatech, Rangam, and Daily Hive. We have 7 presenters today with topics as diverse as our country. The chat will be open throughout the day, so feel free to send in questions. Our presentations are all pre-recorded and there is no live question and answer, but we will send your questions to the presenters and they will respond next week. With that, I'll hand it off to a very special guest. Thank you.
I'm Eugene Levy, and I'm very excited and honored to be welcoming you to the 5th annual Awesome Conference presented by Autism Canada. This is the only conference where all the presentations are by individuals on the autism spectrum, so that alone should make this thing worth the price of admission. This is a day of sharing, learning, acceptance, and inclusion for the autism community, and anyone else who would like to learn more about autism. My own personal connection with autism started about 10 or 12 years ago. My cousin Brenda got me involved. Brenda has a son with autism, on the extreme end of the spectrum, and wanted me to help lend my name. I got a chance to see firsthand just how difficult it is for family members with a person in the family with autism, particularly on the extreme end of the spectrum, and just how costly it is for these families and just how much sacrifice they have to go through. So it's an ongoing fight, but that experience has got me to the point where I'm here tonight to introduce your keynote speaker today, who is Wanda Deschamps. Wanda K. Deschamps is the founder of Liberty Company. She is a champion for inclusion who enjoys writing and speaking under the banner of the Inclusion Revolution, a worldwide movement launched in 2018 to spearhead broader thinking about disability, especially disability employment. Wanda is also the catalyst behind the hashtag Women for Women collective focused on gender equality through supporting other women. Combining these two goals provides an avenue for Wanda to be an advocate for women with autism, including as a participant in research into autistic women's experiences in the workplace. Prior to founding Liberty Company, Wanda enjoyed a 25-year career in the philanthropic sector, serving as a consultant for KCI, Ketchum Canada, Inc., a leading fundraising consultancy, as well as an institutional development leader. Wanda, you're making me feel like I just haven't done enough with my life. So, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Wanda K. Deschamps.
Wanda cherche à augmenter le niveau de participation de la population neurodiverse au marché du travail en mettant un accent particulier sur l'autisme en raison de son propre diagnostic au milieu de sa vie. Championne de l'inclusion, elle aime écrire et parler sous la bannière de la Inclusion Revolution, un mouvement mondial lancé en 2018 pour mener une réflexion plus large sur le handicap, en particulier l'emploi des personnes handicapées. Wanda est également le catalyseur du collectif Women for Women, axé sur l'égalité des sexes en soutenant d'autres femmes. La combinaison de ces deux objectifs permettent à Wanda de défendre les intérêts des femmes autistes, notamment en participant à la recherche sur l'expérience des femmes autistes en milieu de travail. Wanda vit à Waterloo, en Ontario, avec son mari et leurs 2 fils.
Hello, my name is Wanda Deschamps. I am an openly autistic entrepreneur, and I'm so pleased to be with you today to deliver this keynote for Awesome 2021. I wish to begin by saying that I'm on the Haldeman Tract, the land promised to the 6 nations, including 6 miles on each side of the Grand River. It is the inequalities caused by colonialism and other forms of systemic oppression that motivate me to turn this injustice to action by supporting all historically marginalized groups on their journeys of self-determination. This includes Indigenous peoples and it includes the disability population, of which I am a proud member. I officially became a member of the disability population at the age of 46 when I was diagnosed with autism. However, I now know I was born autistic. I just did not know I had a different brain makeup from the mainstream population. Sometimes I'm asked, you were only diagnosed with autism at midlife? Didn't you know you were different? And I respond and I say that I knew I was different. However, I attribute it to various reasons, including differences in my family structure from my peers and other aspects of my environment. I came from a big family. I was the youngest of 10 children. My parents were both strong advocates for gender equality. That was really progressive for the time. They were also well-educated and well-traveled. Here is a photo for you of me when I was 5, taken when we were in England. We lived as a family for a year. I actually started school there at grade primary. When we returned to Canada, say by around grade 4, I did notice that I struggled interacting with my peers. Because of this, I was a target for teasing and bullying. So to help combat, one of my approaches was observing and copying the behaviors of other children, especially popular students and especially girls. I did this in order to fit in. Looking back, I realized that I was masking my autistic characteristics and traits in an attempt to belong. And it worked to a degree because I did learn to fit in more, and I fit in more in junior high and high school. Although during those periods, I did still struggle socially, and I struggled academically in some ways as well. Although my marks improved in high school, I was able to focus on subjects that were of particular interest, as well as register for subject tracks that suited my abilities. During this time, my home and personal life were complicated and stressful in many ways. Despite it all, I persevered and I graduated from high school in Nova Scotia in 1988. I entered university the following year and pursued a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology with a minor in history. And I had a wide range in my marks. In some courses, I did okay, and in some, I didn't do well at all. And this really troubled me. I entered counseling with a psychologist for that reason, due to stressful family matters and for my own anxiety. However, autism never crossed my or anyone else's mind. This is a reflection of the overall environment relating to autism specifically and disability generally in the late 80s and 90s. There just wasn't the level of awareness, and we didn't have the programs and supports in place, like, for instance, we do in schools and post-secondary institutions today. After I graduated from university, I attended private business college in Halifax from fall 1992 to 1993, and I performed quite well. Well, with one exception, in a course that I found challenging. However, my attentiveness to detail was rewarded, and I was delighted, after the ambiguity of a liberal arts education, to discover the straightforward yes and no answers of my courses, especially business accounting. In fact, after the ambiguity of my undergrad experiences, this was all a relief. After graduation, I began my career in the charitable sector in Halifax. I also got married and divorced, and then I met my second husband, Ryan. We got married and started a family. And from the outside looking in, it was like we had everything. In fact, if you asked people who knew us during that period, they would probably say, like, we did appear like we had it all. However, there was always something gnawing at me. When I was 40, we relocated to the prairies. And despite the happy face that I consistently presented, I can only describe the time as one of complete upheaval. Our older son was diagnosed with autism the first winter we were there, and around that time, I noticed significant challenges for me at work. On the one hand, and outwardly, I was successful. I had entered the most senior position of my career, and I was receiving recognition for my subject matter knowledge and application. On the other hand, and inwardly, I was highly anxious and often confused and unsure about how I came across to others. In some contexts, I noticed I had to work very hard to connect with some individuals, and I struggled to communicate, for example, when attaching words to concepts. I noticed that I preferred discussions focused on strategy or high level. I thoroughly detested office gossip and petty politics, and I became frustrated when ideas and thoughts, which I thought were basic and fundamental, were not understood or even followed through in basic ways. Deep down, I actually thought I was stupid. This goes back to some of the challenges I had, which I shared with you from junior high and high school, especially when I floundered in some courses in junior high. So I would ask myself, if I understand this and I'm stupid, then why do others not understand? You can maybe imagine how these behaviors cause barriers in some working relationships. Either individually or combined, these factors led me to be completely misunderstood on occasion, despite my intentions, which I knew deep down were good. Remember, we had relocated to a whole new region. So I was meeting and interacting and working with so many new people. I really noticed the stark contrast between people who sincerely approached me with an open mind, did not prejudge, did not succumb to biases, those who truly took my best interests seriously and wanted me and us to be successful, and those who prejudged and succumbed to biases, meaning that they mistook my intentions, or worse, projected intentions on me that I did not even have. Within all these demands of my work and a home life that was very stressful, I enrolled in my master's in history at the University of Regina, first on a part-time basis in 2013, and then a full-time basis the following year after I left my job. I entered counseling when I was a full-time student because of concerns I had about myself, and particularly my anxiety. It did help in the short term. However, again, autism did not cross my mind, and it didn't cross the mind of my health professional either. On the student side, it was not always easy. I had to produce multiple versions of essays and other assignments before they were acceptable for submission. And like early experiences I just shared with you and in school and at work, I did notice that I continually struggled to attach words to concepts. My marks did not necessarily reflect the effort I invested in my work. However, despite all of this, I passed, and at almost age 45, I fulfilled my lifelong dream of earning a graduate degree. By this time, we had relocated to Ontario, and it seemed like another great position. 1 year into my time at my new job, I noticed there were a wide range of reactions to me. And this was exacerbated by the sensory overload I experienced sometimes. I would later learn that I really suffered from a lack of self-awareness, and I definitely suffered from an underlying lack of self-esteem due to experiences rooted in childhood, some of which I just shared with you, mistreatment and bullying by my peers. At work, I constantly welcomed and received feedback, shifted and modified my behavior accordingly, committed to self-improvement. Despite all this, my vulnerabilities were detected and frankly, at times exploited, leaving me feeling as if my rights as a human being were irrelevant simply because I was different. No surprise that my mental health deteriorated, especially towards the end of 2016 and the winter of 2017. So by May of 2017, I had a complete breakdown at work. Our younger son was diagnosed with autism on May 24th, 2017. And at a previously scheduled doctor's appointment the next day, I asked my family physician for my own psychological assessment, explaining to her, I think I have it too. And on July 25th, 2017, I received my diagnosis of autism and thereby started my journey of self-discovery. I was not willing to tolerate behaviors and mistreatment that I had tolerated previously. This is part of looking at everything through a new prism. So one way I channeled this was by seeking workplace accommodation. It didn't work out, and eventually I lost my job, putting me in a path of committing to living life as what I describe as real Wanda. This is according to my own values and principles. Part of it is telling my story to increase awareness and acceptance so that it may lead to a smoother path for others. One example is that my story of undiagnosed autism ran in the Broadview magazine April 2020 issue for Autism Acceptance Month. And this excerpt here from it was tweeted on Autism Acceptance Day. And I really did feel like my brain was whole for the first time after I received my autism diagnosis. Another key part of living life as real Wanda is entrepreneurship. When I launched Liberty Co. and began sharing my story, more and more I realized how fortunate I've been. As an autistic woman who's been employed throughout her career, I am actually one of the lucky ones. And perhaps you know this unfortunate reality that the majority of the autistic population is either unemployed or underemployed. And this is a real shame because this means our skills and talents are going untapped and we're unable to make the contributions that we wish to make and we know we can make. So my firm, Liberty Co., is focusing on increasing the participation level of the neurodiverse population in the workforce with a special emphasis on autism due to my own diagnosis and the diagnoses of my sons. I want a smoother path for others, as I shared with you. And so one way I'm attempting to make this happen is by working within the IDEA framework and advocating for avenues towards greater IDEA. Yes, I've learned to add an A for accessibility, because if we are truly going to have inclusive, diverse, and equitable workplaces, we also need accessible workplaces, meaning they're reachable, enterable, and approachable for everyone. And this also means including your brain makeup. And traditionally, we have thought about accessibility from a disability standpoint as perhaps removing barriers to physical access to make venues reachable, enterable, and approachable. But given the majority of disabilities are invisible, such as in my case, we need to provoke new thinking about accessibility. Within autistic workplace accessibility and inclusion, I am particularly committed to inclusive leadership, autistic entrepreneurship, and employee retention, all with a focus on gender equity. I say that autistic talent belongs at all levels of the organization, from the boardroom to the C-suite to the office cubicle. Autistic talent can flourish when our abilities and aptitudes are appreciated and matched with organizational goals and priorities. To this end, a story that has had a really positive impact on me is that of UK executive Charlotte Valeur, pictured here for you. Of the many things that Charlotte is doing, she is helping to establish the Institute of Neurodiversity, which is set to launch later this year. Charlotte is championing all her efforts through her lived experience as a woman who has recently publicly shared her adult autism diagnosis. Entrepreneurship is also an employment pathway for autistics, such as it is for Sasha Borisma, pictured here. However, I want to help ensure that autistics are pulled into entrepreneurship and not pushed in. In other words, I want it to be a choice, and not because autistics have been pushed out of the workforce due to ableism and other forms of discrimination. That is why I'm particularly committed to avenues for employee retention. After employees have been hired, we need to ensure that all the supports are there so that they'll stay in the workplace and be retained as valuable employees. So given these areas of emphasis in my work stemming from my own diagnosis, you might not be surprised to know that I'm sometimes asked, do I wish I had received my diagnosis earlier? Yes, sometimes I do wish I had received my diagnosis earlier. However, it is indeed better late than never, and I'm grateful to have received it in my lifetime. I realize that underdiagnosis still persists across the autism spectrum, especially among girls and women. And that is one of the reasons I participate in autistic research whenever I can. And I'm particularly committed to research into autistic women's experiences in the workforce. My diagnosis helped me develop a level of self-awareness that I did not even know was possible. And the benefits to me are really impossible to exaggerate. In fact, I say self-awareness is the greatest gift you can give yourself. So I want to help others ensure these positive experiences are available for them. Self-awareness has led me to self-assurance, again, at a level that I didn't even know was possible. And it is helping enable me to be a proud autism mom, modeling for my children to be unashamed, unafraid, and undeterred as a disabled autistic woman. Which takes me to something else I wanted to share with you. And that is sometimes when I'm interviewed, I'm asked for a piece of advice or a word to pass on to others. And when I'm asked that, I respond with believe. It's a word that really resonates with me. And I say it because I did not believe in myself for so much of my life. I did not believe in myself because I did not know myself. Although it's interesting, often in my life, I appeared as confident. And if you ask people to describe me from what they knew, they would say Wanda did appear as confident. But that was outward. Confidence and self-security are different things because confidence is something we exert outwardly, and self-security is something that's inward. So believe in yourself. It's really important. I encourage you to do so and to surround yourself with people who believe in you. It's something that's really made a difference for me. You've likely noticed by now that my overall message is one of hope and optimism, and that is for several reasons, including more and more disability inclusion is being recognized as necessary. In fact, some say that the 2020s belong to disability justice. To that end, I was delighted to learn about the launch of the We 15. This campaign is centered on change for the 15% of us worldwide who have a disability. At a time when diversity and inclusion are receiving more and more attention, we with disabilities are also advocating for equity and equality. Because along with a range of social, racial, and ethnic backgrounds and differences in genders and social orientations, since disability is a dimension of diversity, and like movements for race, gender, and sexual orientation, we want to have a movement all persons with disabilities can rally behind. This is a global movement launched just before the Tokyo Paralympic Games, and it is publicly campaigning for disability, visibility, inclusion, and accessibility. And a founding partner of We the 15 is the Valuable 500. And I'm raising it because if you follow me, perhaps you know that I often speak and write under the banner, The Inclusion Revolution. This is a worldwide movement launched in 2018 to spearhead broader thinking about disability, especially disability employment. Founded by Caroline Casey and Paul Pullman, it is revolutionizing disability inclusion through business leadership and opportunity, so that the majority of the disability population will not remain unemployed and underemployed. And that includes the autistic population. It is named the Valuable 500 because they have secured commitment from 500 national and multinational private sector corporations to put disability employment on the highest decision agendas of those organizations. Because the potential of us, we the 15% of the world's population, that's over 1 billion people worldwide, should not be ignored, and it's not going to be ignored. So now I'm going to issue an invitation to you, and it's the way I close every presentation that I make. I'm asking you, in this post-Me Too era of Black Lives Matter and Indigenous reconciliation with disability justice as the burgeoning social movement, will you join the inclusion revolution? Thank you so much for allowing me to be part of Awesome 2021. If you wish to, I hope you consider reaching out to me, either messaging me or connecting with me on social. And most importantly, have an awesome conference.
Our website is a great place to find educational materials, screening tools, and support. Check out the resource section for our newsletters, podcast, ASD Central, and other important information.
Notre site web est un réseau pour les ressources et outils en ce qui concerne le TSA. Consultez la section de ressources pour le bulletin, nos balados, Frank Autisme et plus d'informations.
We are so pleased to have Cormark Securities back as a presenting sponsor again this year. One of Canada's foremost capital market specialists, underwriters, and M&A advisors. Cormark is a leading independent dealer focused on providing comprehensive coverage of Canadian-listed companies to domestic and international institutional investors from offices in Toronto and Calgary.
Nous sommes très heureuses d'avoir Cormark Securities Inc. de retour en tant que commanditaire d'Awesome cette année. Cormark est un courtier indépendant de premier plan qui se concentre sur la couverture complète des sociétés canadiennes cotées en bourse aux investisseurs institutionnels nationaux et internationaux et de nos entreprises à Toronto et à Calgary.
Coming up next, William Caruna, Keeping Your Head Above Water in Post-Secondary Education. Kim Souch and Sara Sobey, How Music Created a Bridge for a Mother and Daughter on the Spectrum.
Présentateur et présentatrice à venir, William Caruna, Gardez votre tête hors de l'eau dans vos études postsecondaires. Et Kim Souch et Sara Sobey, Comment la musique a renforcé une relation entre une mère et sa fille sur le spectre.
William Caruna, Keeping Your Head Above Water in Post-Secondary.
Gardez votre tête hors de l'eau dans vos études postsecondaires.
William Caruna is an openly autistic 20-something with a love for film, video games, and business. Using his own experience advocating for himself while earning a Bachelor of Commerce in Management at the University of Toronto, he will share the tips he found most useful and that allowed him to be more successful in post-secondary education.
William Caruna, dans la vingtaine, ouvertement autiste qui aime le cinéma, les jeux vidéo et les affaires. William Caruna est dans la vingtaine et ouvertement autiste avec un amour pour le cinéma, les jeux vidéo et les affaires. Il a obtenu un baccalauréat en commerce en gestion de l'Université de Toronto. Défenseur de ses droits, William croit fermement à aider tous les membres de la communauté de l'autisme.
Hello. So, my name is William Caruna, and I'd like to welcome you to today's presentation. I have opted to call this presentation Keeping Your Head Above Water in Post-Secondary because, it is a little bit difficult. But once you know how to swim, or once you know how to tread water, the freedom and the abilities at your disposal are truly boundless and endless. It's amazing. And so I found this to be a rather apt title. And as you can see, I've got it so the little bubbles move and everything. So, to start, I'd like to tell you a little bit about me. As mentioned before, my name's William Caruna, but you can call me Will. I recently graduated Rotman Commerce at the University of Toronto, which is a very prestigious school where I focused in management and marketing. Additionally, I had 2 minors in cinema and economics. I'm a proud Aspie. I am proud of who I am. I am proud of being a part of the Asperger's and autism community, and I believe that Autism Canada is a truly wonderful organization. I've had the opportunity to both work and volunteer with them, and I really do believe that they have the best of us at heart, best interests of us at heart. And additionally, I would like to say that I've had my struggles with mental health, obsessive compulsive disorder, anxiety, depression, and so I know the importance of having someone to listen, someone to talk to, and someone that's there. So that will play a part in today's presentation as well. As for what I'm doing right now, I am a master's student at Schulich, which is the business school of the York University. I am taking a Master's of Marketing program there. And yeah, I hope you have been enjoying the presentation thus far. I know that at Autism Canada they've put a ton of work into this. There are some really great speakers, Eugene Levy of course, and so I really do hope that you have enjoyed this. So, for today, I have 6 tips for survival. There's no need for an SOS here. Everything's going to be A-okay. So, I'd like to begin with the first tip, and the reason I've made this the first tip is that it is arguably the one that you should address, if possible, before you get to university. and that is you need to get into contact with accessibility services. Now, this can take different names at different places, but for the sake of consistency, I will be using the name that it was referred to at the University of Toronto. And you can see a little picture of it back here. It was at 455 Spadina, in between a place called Clubhouse and the 7-Eleven. And in that quiet little office, there were changes made to my education that helped substantially. So, accessibility services will help provide you with the accommodations and things you need to succeed. As someone with a disability or disorder, or however you may want to define it, a difference, so to speak, it is important that we realize that there are barriers to our education. And of course, that will vary from person to person. For some, it may be social. For some, it may be a rather high barrier. For some, it may be rather low. In my case, it was pretty low. But accessibility services will help you overcome these barriers. They can offer a ton of different accommodations. In my case, I was given extended time on my tests, and I was given extended periods to submit my assignments as necessary. I was able to type my exams, which was really important because, I hate to say it, my handwriting is quite poor. My penmanship is okay, but my generalized handwriting is not very good. So that made a real difference for me. It alleviated a lot of the stress, and it made it easier to get through the exams. And they can offer tons of different services as well, including volunteer note-taking. You know, taking notes is a vital part of education, but it's not going to always be easy for everyone. Moving on to my second point, I believe there's absolutely no shame in taking a reduced course load. University can be difficult. It's hard. And the same goes for college, the same goes for apprenticeships, the same goes for pretty much any sort of post-secondary institution. It can be very overwhelming to have a lot on your plate at once, especially because in high school you would typically be talking about 4 courses, now we're talking maybe 5 or 6. So, getting a reduced course load will make things a lot easier for you. In my case, I saw a rather substantial jump up in grades from my second year compared to the first because I was able to take a reduced course load and focus more. That did mean having to take courses over the summer, which is a sacrifice in and of itself. You know, I didn't really take the same internships that some of my peers did. I was busy working, but doing so also allowed me to succeed. Now, taking a reduced course load might mean that you graduate later than your peers, or you work in the summer, or there are other ways around it. But you need to know that there is absolutely no shame in doing this. This is just a piece of advice that matters to everyone. Whether you're talking yourself, your brothers and sisters, your friends, it holds no barriers. Sometimes people just need to have a bit less on their plate, because it will make it easier for them to succeed. So, for my third point, I'd like to reiterate that the first year of university is often the hardest. I mentioned before that I had improved rather significantly second year over first, and that's for a reason. In my case, the first year had some rather difficult courses such as economics, introduction to management, math and calculus, and, you know, well, I had great appreciation for those courses, and in the case of management, it was more so a very difficult final exam rather than the course material. Getting through them was a challenge, you know, and part of the biggest factors in that is university is a change. And, you know, not all people on the spectrum necessarily love change. I can definitely attest to that. There's some that do, of course, but big changes are not things that I tend to like. And so having to adjust, having to see how things have gone, you know, first year also had some difficulties involving the health of some of my family members, which sort of compounded things, but The point is, first year is often going to be the hardest. The good news to that is if you can get through first year, you can get through second year, you can get through third year, you can get through fourth year. Heck, you can even get through a graduate program with a lot less stress and be able to keep your head above your shoulders, keep your chin up, and it'll be all right. But you gotta know that the first year is often the hardest. And you also need to know that high school isn't necessarily reflective of post-secondary. It can be, but on average, expect your grades to go down. In my case, I went from a 93 average across high school, the last year at least, to a 74.5 average at university with about a 79 and 80 average in the last year. Similarly, I want to reiterate that it's okay to find your way. It's a big ask to know exactly what you want to do with your life. Getting right out of high school, Ultimately, you're still young. And for some of us, we have decided our life path, from the moment we were in diapers. And for others, you need to find your way a bit. There's nothing wrong with maybe take a gap year. There's nothing wrong with looking to other areas of expertise, other studies, other workplaces. To give the perfect example, there were many people who joined my commerce program who went off into different areas: criminology, political science, science in general, sociology, film. There is absolutely no shame in finding your way and deciding, maybe this isn't for me. Now, of course, this may have happened to some of you even in high school. In my case, when I was in the 9th grade, I wanted nothing more than to be a pharmacist. I was all about becoming a pharmacist, learning of all the different drugs and prescriptions and pills, and looking into potential real estate to open a pharmacy. I was committed. I was ready. Then I took science, and I realized, this isn't quite for me. This isn't the skill set that most aligns with me. And then I took a marketing course, and I realized that, I was memorizing the names of tuna can brands when I was 2 years old, and realizing in retrospect, that's what I want to do. So the point being here, there's nothing wrong with changing your mind, with finding your way. There's a ton of flexibility in post-secondary to do this. If necessary, if you have to go back, that's an option as well. You can find your way in the workplace. But the point being, hardly anyone has their entire life mapped out. And even those who do, they tend to change it often. So it's okay to take some time and go, I don't know if this is what I want to do. Or I know wholeheartedly this is what I want to do. Now, the 5th piece of advice is to make some time for yourself. I cannot reiterate how important this is. So pictured here is the Toronto International Film Festival, which would have wrapped up about a month from when you're hearing this first. TIFF, or the Toronto International Film Festival, is my absolute favorite event. I make a habit to go every year to see the new movies, to see the stars, to take in the sights and sounds. Festival Street, as it was called, is pictured here back pre-COVID, and it really is an amazing time. Similarly, I have hobbies. I watch movies. I have an Xbox and a PlayStation. I really do think that keeping some time set aside for your hobbies is important, Now, I understand, especially given the current economic environment, especially given the changes that are involved with going to post-secondary and the expectations of studying, that you won't always have time for yourself. But if you can make some time for anything from meeting up with a friend for a coffee to taking in a film at the theater, to playing an extra hour of Fortnite, reading a good book, flipping through the newspaper, whatever it is that makes you interested, you need to make some time for yourself, because maintaining a work-life balance is key. If you're all work and no play, then really what's the point of it all? Similarly, it needs to be said that the opposite is true here too. I'm not saying your studies don't matter, let's just go off and play video games and read books and watch movies, because who cares? Because ultimately, of course, that's going to harm your grades, that's going to harm your mental health, it's going to harm a lot of things. But it's like all things in life, it's about maintaining that balance. Finally, and the sixth point, which sort of builds off the fifth, your mental health is important. You know, grades are important, school is important, but your mental health is most important. Your physical health is important as well. But in the case of your mental health, you have value, okay? As I said, your grades might take a bit of a drop, or they might go up. You know, it might be a little difficult. You might have those moments where you go, why am I here? Why am I doing this? Is this what I want to do? And that's totally okay. You know, you have value ultimately. And no transcript, no GPA, no amount of extracurriculars or lack thereof is going to define the true value that you have, because you are important and your mental health is important. So please, if you need to take a break, if you need to contact accessibility services for further accommodations, if you need to sit back and go, you know what, I need a semester to reflect on what I've learned and decide for myself if this is the right move, any of those things, that's all alright, you know, because you have value and your mental health is important. I keep reiterating it, but it's true. So, in terms of other frequently asked questions about university, I'll start with the topic of Zoom. You know, oftentimes you will be expected to be on camera in classes, but that will always vary dependent on the professor. In terms of note-taking, I highly recommend using OneNote or a notebook, whichever is best for you. I know that some professors are not the most keen on technology use, but I also understand that technology use can be rather important. It's a part of our day-to-day lives, and again, as mentioned, my handwriting has never been great. So maybe it's a good idea to contact accessibility services and make sure that your professors know that you have your laptops and technological aids for a reason. Just be sure not to get too distracted, okay? Because otherwise you won't be learning anything. In terms of classes, I think the best advice I can give there is to try and modify your timetable to best fit your needs. Now, of course, there are elements that will be out of your control there. I have classes at 8:30 in the morning for my master's program right now. I'm a night owl, so you can probably guess I don't love that as much. But if you can, try and make sure that you have space in between your classes, enough time to get from building to building as applicable. You know, if you learn best from home and you have the option to learn from home or from school, there's no harm in learning from home. Similarly, if you learn best in person, there's no harm. Just stay distant, stay safe, wear your masks. And yeah, in terms of any other questions you may have, this is where this next section comes in handy, because you are free to contact me. I can be found on Twitter at William J. Caruana. That's WILLIAMJCARUANA. Just follow me or send a tweet to me. Send a tweet at me requesting a private message, and I will get back to you, and we can private message. Similarly, you can find the link to my LinkedIn profile here. That's linkedin.com/n/William-C-934B93130/. So if you need anything at all, if there's anything I can help you with, please contact, and I will try to get back to you as soon as possible. Finally, I just want to say thank you, Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for taking the time of your day. I hope I've helped you. If I have, great. If not, well, I hope you still got something out of this. And really, I hope you have a great rest of the conference. Again, I think we've got so many amazing speakers and amazing advocates for the community, teachers. We've got, Awesome Conference is amazing because it's for people on the spectrum, by people on the spectrum. It's important that our voices are heard. So once again, I thank you for attending, and if you have any questions, any at all, please feel free to reach out. Best regards.
Sharing the skills and talents of the autism community is what Show Us Your Awesome is all about. We hope you enjoy this year's submissions.
Partager les talents de la communauté de l'autisme, c'est l'essence même de Show Us Your Awesome, montrez-nous votre awesome. Nous espérons que vous apprécieriez les soumissions de cette année.
Show Us Your Awesome, art by Hannah Lastoria.
Montrez-nous votre awesome, dessin par Hannah Lastoria.
Hannah is 13 years old and loves being creative with art and making her own music.
Anna a 13 ans et aime être créative dans ses dessins et faire sa propre musique.
We'd like to recognize Public Label as a first-time sponsor of the Awesome Conference. Thanks so much for being with us today. Public Label is a North American creative marketing agency. Public Label's mission is to help brands recognize and align with consumer motivations and cultural movements to help bring stronger brand affinity and loyalty.
Nous vous souhaitons la bienvenue à Public Label, qui est commanditaire pour la première fois de la conférence Awesome. Merci beaucoup d'être avec nous aujourd'hui. Commanditaire principal. Public Label est une grande agence de marketing créatif nord-américaine. La mission de Public Label est d'aider les marques à reconnaître et à s'aligner sur les motivations des consommateurs et les mouvements culturels afin de renforcer leur affinité et leur fidélité à la marque.
Hi, I'm Ann Dean with Public Label, an integrated advertising agency in Toronto, and this is my colleague, Tim Binkley.
Hi everyone, it's an absolute honor to be a sponsor for this year's conference and an agency partner for Autism Canada.
Tim and I are thrilled to be working with Autism Canada as an in-kind partner in helping the organization reimagine how they create understanding and acceptance of ASD. Autism is clearly very difficult to understand. It is complex. There's a quote I love from Dr. Stephen Shore. If you've met one individual with autism, you've met one individual with autism. In our current environment of cultural movements, there is a huge opportunity to create a following and an understanding of how to help. As Autism Canada's strategic and creative agency partner, we are committed to create a better understanding of what autism is, what it means to be an individual with autism, and how to create an environment where everyone can thrive.
Our objective at Public Label is to produce messaging by exposing reality that generates a response and a change in perception. We are dedicated to fostering an understanding that will enable Autism Canada to establish itself as the authentic voice and a destination for all resources to support individuals, families, caregivers, and stakeholders across Canada.
On behalf of the entire Public Label team, thank you for bringing us into your community. We are thrilled to be part of this conference and be working with Autism Canada to support the cause.
Kim, Souch, and Sara Sobey, how music provided a bridge between a mother and daughter on the spectrum.
Comment la musique a renforcé une relation entre une mère et sa fille sur le spectre.
Kim and Sara began performing together when Sara was just a young teen. Kim was a touring singer-songwriter when Sara was little, so it was not a surprise that Sara could sing before she could speak. What Kim could not have known was that music would become the bridge between both of their worlds. Their story, which includes the realm of autism, is inspiring. Their beautiful songs and harmonies will capture your imagination.
Kim et Sara ont commencé à jouer ensemble quand Sara n'était qu'une jeune adolescente. Kim était chanteuse et compositrice en tournée quand Sara était petite. Donc, ce n'était pas une surprise que Sara puisse chanter avant de pouvoir parler. Ce que Kim ne pouvait pas savoir, c'est que la musique deviendrait le pont entre les deux mondes. Leur histoire, qui comprend l'autisme, est inspirante. Leurs belles chansons et harmonies captiveront votre imagination.
The world, waiting for my chance to fly. As I grew, I began to see the world through different eyes. Now the child in me still wonders, the girl in me still cries, the dreams in me still hunger, and the woman in me tries. In a simple smile, been trapped by fear, chased by shadows, and walked along the edge a while. But my soul, it keeps on searching, my voice, it will be heard, my heart, it stays wide open, thankful each day I return.
Hi, I'm Kim, and this is Sara, and we're going to sing a few songs for you about possibilities.
They are a mother and daughter team with a message about celebrating ability. Sarah Sobey is 19 years old and has autism. Music is the bridge between her world and her mother, Kim, who writes the music and accompanies her on guitar.
Hi everybody, my name's Kim. I'm the creative director of Heartfelt Music and Productions and part of the mother-daughter duo Sara that's going to be performing for you during this session today. Thanks so much for joining us, and thank you so much to Julie and Autism Canada for inviting us to participate in this year's conference. We're pretty excited, looking forward to seeing all the other presenters, and also looking forward to Eugene Levy's introduction. That sounds so awesome, and so glad that he could be part of this as well. And we're so fortunate to be able to share our story with you today.
Hey everybody, my name is Kim and this is Sara. We're Sara, and our company is Steve Strom today. Thank you so much for inviting us to join you for the awesome conference. We're so excited. We're going to start off with one of, I guess the song that kind of started it all. One of the first ones that we did. Hey, Sara? And then we'll talk a little bit about our story. It's called Possibilities. Our story began when Sara was just little. She was born into the autism spectrum. We didn't get a diagnosis till Sara was close to 6. After many appointments and visits to the doctor and lots of investigation. So at that particular time, which was in the 90s, the supports for language and all those things were just starting to drop off in school. So it's changed very much now in terms of those supports starting younger, but I know there's a lot of wait lists now, which are the problem in current times compared. But as she was, even from a young age, before she could speak, she literally started singing. She'd sing out in all sorts of places and just had a lovely voice, which was very cool. I'm a musician and a songwriter and a teacher, and I've always ran music part-time, working in bands and things as I worked in community relations, and then over time have come to be full-time music business. And so Sara was always around music and was able to come. You came in and out of my studio, and you often came to music things with me. And it soon became apparent that she loved to sing, and even though her language took a long time before she could speak, you know, and catch up to her age level speaking, she could sing full sentences and stories in music. So one of the first songs she brought to me as I was sitting in my studio one night, I just finished teaching, and I'd gotten her some karaoke tracks because she loved Disney movies and animation, which is another one of her creative skills and loves. So she brought out one of the karaoke songs for me, and she wanted to sing and had indicated the mic. So I'm like, oh, very cool. And it was I Believe I Can Fly. And so just a totally awesome choice, and it really spoke I guess that's the first time it truly spoke to me, just how she was communicating through music before she could communicate verbally how she was feeling and what her dreams might be. So shortly after that, actually, through some of her support workers, some great teenagers that used to help me and her brothers as well, she has an older and a younger brother, I knew that there was a school talent contest coming up and that she was interested in participating, but she wasn't sure if she'd be able to participate. So I approached the teacher, she's a lovely lady, and had mentioned that I thought Sara wanted to participate in the music contest or the talent show, and she wanted to sing. And I explained that she was quite good at, great singer, she could use a microphone, it would be a great opportunity for her. So Sara got to do her first talent show. And I remember I was talking with you, Sara, about how that kind of helped in school a little bit after you sang, because you got lots of comments from people about your beautiful voice and from the teachers about your singing, didn't you, after you did that in your public school? Yeah. So it made a huge difference for how she felt, her self-esteem, and for her interactions with all of her friends and her peers. So that's kind of where the project idea of us singing together as mother and daughter started. And she used to, in between that time and when we formed Sara, she used to get up with me with bands, especially the band Detour that I used to play with. Didn't you, Sara?
Yeah.
And she'd come travel with me where we could, where it was a family event, and get up and sing. And before we knew it, she was grabbing the mic away, and she was just exactly having so much fun performing, and such a natural performer. She's not a ham or anything. Either am I, really. Right, Steve?
I don't know what the hell.
Anyways, that's kind of how the project originated.
This next song is one of my favorites that I've written for our project, and it truly just talks about our life is very much like anyone else's life. All those family relationships and adventures that we've had together, and I find a lot of people really enjoy this one with us because they can relate. In our case, because like mother, like daughter.
All about the room, plays some music real loud, likes to sleep till noon, spends all her spare time at the mall shopping, like a tornado spinning, she keeps me hopping. She likes bright colors and has a sweet tooth, loves to dance and giggle and raise the roof, takes me back just a few years or so. My mom's voice calling through the kitchen below. Girl, let's get going, quit looking in the mirror. Those clothes are just fine, yes, your hair looks nice. As my mind clicks back, she's at my side, ready for our first dance tonight in those new high heels. We got her like mother, like daughter. Her
This next song that we want to do for you is a newer one that's been written the last few years. And I think a good appropriate one for the time that we're in. It was written before COVID. We had just gone through a lot of changes, a lot of challenges in our life, hadn't we, Sara?
Yeah.
And I'd really been reflecting on that, and I think just feeling a little low at the time and down, just trying to keep up with everything. All of us were, and losing some pretty important people in our lives, which we were all really feeling. And I just started noticing just at some of those moments that little different versions of rainbows would start appearing. Sometimes just little reflections on a wall, in a hallway, sometimes an actual rainbow out in the sky, just in really unexpected places actually, or a sun catcher in a window. And it always seemed to be at a moment when I just really needed that little reminder and lift that the rainbow was at the end of all the changes and challenges. So this one is called Rainbows.
Bouncing down the hallway when darkness falls and tries to block my view. They shine through. And I'm walking in rainbows, ribbons so bright, changing, shaping, rearranging, never far out of sight. If I stumble and try to build a wall, I hear them call the music that colors my life. Rainbows. So you say that I can't, don't try to change things, that I should dim the light and just accept things. But who I am doesn't need to fit in your life. These colors, no, these colors can't be defined. And I'm walking in rainbows, ribbons so bright, changing, shaping, rearranging, never far outside. If I stumble and try to build a wall, I hear them call the music that colors my life. Rainbows. My story, my vision, my life. What I want, I design. My gifts help you shine a light. Rainbow shining in you, shining in me. And I'm walking in rainbows, ribbons so bright, changing, shaping, rearranging, never far out of sight. If I stumble and try to build a wall, I hear them call the music that comes my life. Rainbow. Walking in love green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies are blue, the clouds are white, the bright pleasant days, dark secret nights, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the skies, they're also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying how do you do. They're really saying I love you. I hear babies cry, I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the skies, they're also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying how do you do. They're really saying I love you. I hear babies cry, I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Hey, yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for joining our presentation.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting us to participate in your awesome conference. We so enjoyed it. My name's Kim.
Sara.
And Steve.
From Sara. We hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All cozy in together.
Thanks for joining our presentation.
I'm Kim.
And I'm Sara.
I'm Steve.
Thanks so much. We hope you have a great rest of November. No, a great rest of October. We gotta do this again, sorry. Okay, Sara, go for it.
Thanks for watching our presentation.
Oh, sorry, we gotta start again. We were like all awkward with our arms. Okay, here we go. Steve's gonna be doing the rabbit ears. Okay.
Thanks for joining our presentation.
Coming up next, Kieran Rose, Autistic Masking and Burnout. Michael Tanzer, a reading from Michaelism, My POV on Life with Autism. Minni, a conversation about employment and hiring practices.
Présentateurs et présentatrices à venir. Kieran Rose, le masquage autistique et l'épuisement autistique. Michael Tanzer, une lecture de Michaelism, My POV on Life with Autism. Minni, parler des pratiques d'emploi et d'embauche.
We're going to take a 5-minute intermission, so now's a great time to grab a drink or a snack. As well, we'll be sharing some music from Bruce Petherick. Enjoy, and see you back here in 5.
Nous allons faire une pause de 5 minutes et nous reviendrons tout de suite. Prenez une opportunité pour prendre une collation et revenez-nous dans 5 minutes. Profitez de la musique de Bruce Petherick pendant la pause.
Show us you're awesome. Isla Shannon is a 10-year-old downhill ski racer and member of the Lake Louise Ski Club in Alberta.
Isla Shannon est une coureuse de ski alpin de 10 ans et membre du Lake Louise Ski Club en Alberta.
Just a quick heads up that we're going to get started again in about 1 minute.
Nous allons commencer dans environ 1 minute.
Kieran Rose, Autistic Masking and Burnout.
Le masquage autistique et le surmenage autistique.
Kieran Rose, otherwise known as the Autistic Advocate, was clinically diagnosed as autistic in 2003 and is a parent of autistic children. An international public speaker, Kieran provides specialist training aimed at reframing the understanding of autism. Kieran's research specializes in autistic masking, identity, monotropism, and stigma. He is co-founder of a network for autistic advocates, senior advisor to the therapist education organization Therapist Neurodiversity Collective, and is neurodivergence educator for US-based OT charity, the Star Institute. His writing at www.theautisticadvocate.com has been read by over 1.5 million people.
Kieran Rose, a.k.a. The Autistic Advocate, a été diagnostiqué sur le spectre de l'autisme en 2003 et il est parent d'enfants autistes. Conférencier international, Kieran donne une formation spécialisée visant à recadrer la compréhension de l'autisme. Les recherches de Kieran sont spécialisées dans le masquage autistique, l'identité, le monotropisme et la stigmatisation. Il est cofondateur d'un réseau pour les défenseurs autistes, conseiller principal de l'organisation de formation thérapeute Therapist Neurodiversity Collective et est éducateur en neurodivergence pour l'organisme de bienfaisance OT basé aux États-Unis, The Star Institute. Ses écrits sur le www.theautisticadvocate.com ont été lus par plus de 1,5 million de personnes.
Hello, and welcome to my talk on autistic masking and autistic burnout. Thank you for coming to watch me today, and I'm just going to introduce myself. My name is Kieran Rose, and I was diagnosed as autistic in 2003. I am parent to 3 children, 2 of whom are diagnosed autistic. I am a published mainstream and academic author, an international public speaker whose essays at theautisticadvocate.com, which you can see below, have been read by over 1.5 million people. I have a background in special educational needs and service delivery for autistic children and adults. I deliver my own specialist training to professionals, parents, carers and autistic people, and provide private consultancy to charities and organisations around the world. I am the co-founder of the networking organisation The Autistic Cooperative. I'm senior advisor to the international OT and SLP education organisation, the Therapist Neurodiversity Collective, and I'm also a neurodivergence educator for the US OT charity, the Star Institute. I've lectured at universities across the UK. I am a peer reviewer for the academic journal Autism in Adulthood. I'm an honorary research associate for the University of Sunderland in the UK and an associate researcher with Grand at University College London. I am currently co-producing research into different areas including autistic masking, victimization and monotropism and autistic identity, and have co-authored published papers on autistic masking and workplace employment for neurodivergent people. That's enough of me, and on with the talk.
Autism was first officially recognised in the 1940s. Hans Asperger and Leo Kanner, with a helping hand from the medical profession and the charity industry, are the founders and writers of the narrative we currently live under. Its roots lie in and remain tied with eugenics, Nazism and Victorian psychology. Using the framework built by these two men, we've gone on to have a complete misunderstanding and misrepresentation of what autism is, and possibly more importantly, what autism isn't. It's created an autism industry involving charities, universities, pharmaceutical companies, therapists and behaviourists and so on, which worldwide is worth billions of dollars, and a world of services that adds 50% to the price tag when the word sensory is added to it, with barely a penny of any of that ever reaching the pocket of those who need it. This framework has fed into a medical and behavioural model of autism, a model which is implicitly biased towards a so-called male presentation of autism, solely because these 1940s experts and those that followed were biased towards boys. A model upon which research papers are based on the supposed wisdom of all these men. Then research papers are created based upon those research papers. Then research papers are created based upon those research papers. Ergo, myth becomes fact. And this fact is presented to the world. Every few years, the writers of this narrative get together and create a diagnostic criteria, which at its heart is crammed full of bias and error. It's mostly the opinions of a bunch of well-paid professionals who egotistically cling onto their theories, which are all built upon a foundation of sand. Proof of this lies in the fact that in 1925, 13 years before Hans Asperger, a Ukrainian researcher called Grunya Sokoreva identified a list, a criteria of what later came to be known as autism. If you hold that list up to the current diagnostic criteria in the DSM-5, it's almost identical. Only in the world of autism can you make 80 years of supposed progress, only to end up 95 years in the past. Around this, society has developed ways of acting, thinking, and doing things based on evolving concepts rooted in historical behaviours. We call these social norms. Alongside this also, society has developed these concepts of what normality, in inverted commas, is, and how people should behave and act. And what has this collectively given the world? Confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is literally the process of deciding upon something and using information to reinforce that decision. When we receive information that doesn't align with our preconceived notions, we often exclude it or vehemently reject it. In terms of autism, confirmation bias is informed by the societal and behavioural concepts of autism, many of which are grounded in myths, media stereotypes, and textbooks written by non-autistic people who make external observations, and research based on all those notions. We've been spoon-fed a narrative about autism for so long that we've created an image in our minds. It's become the cultural and societal version of autism. We have an idealized image of what autism looks like, so we see what we expect to see. We expect to see autism present only in white boys or men that are LD or genius or who behave in a particular way. And all because society has been primed to see it that way by years of people only talking about autism in white boys or men that are LD or genius or who behave in a particular way. So we end up with an extreme narrow view of how autistic people should present. Hugely representative in popular culture via films, televisions, books, and the media. We have the traditional boy-child version of autism, who screams and melts down and makes parents, particularly mothers, lives a misery. Or we have the party trick white male autistic, exceptionally talented, even savant-level talented at one thing, but otherwise ridiculously, even comically socially inept, quirky or learning disabled, in many ways incompetent and Peter Pan-like. These concepts circle back into professional thinking. Diagnosticians fall for the same myths and stereotypes and use those to reject diagnoses. Researchers, despite being huge on avoiding bias, base their research on other research that reinforces this thinking. Ergo, their work is flawed from the start. They are literally researching based on something that only exists on paper, viewed through the eyes of behavior. Supports either don't exist or are withheld based on notions of being able to function. Teachers attempt to meet needs by using tick box style checklists designed for autistic children, obviously because all autistic children have exactly the same needs and don't differ in any way. Here, have a visual timetable. Professionals are too often stuck in textbook mode. If you don't act the way you are expected to act, then you don't get identified, diagnosed, or supported. Very few people have the context needed to be able to step back and see the bigger picture, so they rely on and feed their confirmation bias. They see and hear what they want to see and hear based on what they think they know. And all this plays into autistic masking. A little quiz for you to ponder while I talk through this next section. Which of these two images is from the bedroom of an autistic child? Masking sits at the heart of our understanding of autism. It intersects with disability, ethnicity, education, the workplace, society, but none more prevalent at the moment than gender, with the current narrative of gendering autism, particularly with what is being described as the female autism phenotype. Of course, autistic women have different experiences to autistic men, in the same way that autistic people of colour, BAME autistic people, gay autistic people, and so on, have different experiences. And in the same way, non-autistic women have different experiences to non-autistic men, and so on. Of course, there are different presentations of autism, because autistic people are individual human beings. Like with all humans, how a person presents is influenced by the nature of each person, their gender, their personality, their upbringing, their race, their religion, their life experiences, their co-occurring conditions too, and the different impact of those different things on different people. Our identities are shaped by those things, but at the heart of it, as a major driver of those identities, our internal experience of what it means to be autistic, how our brains and bodies function, are incredibly similar and relatable. And regardless of the differences I just mentioned, our life stories are usually remarkably similar too. Looking through the eyes of the diagnostic criteria and the current autism narrative, we have the typical presentation of autism, which the criteria attempts to describe and leans to favour white boys. But then we have those who don't really fit that criteria, an atypical type, which the narrative states favours girls. Neither of those things is right though, as boys can and do regularly present with the atypical type, and girls can present with the typical type. Equally, there are transgender boys and girls, non-binary people, and also intersex people who can present as either too. Society plays a huge part here, with girls in particular, because girls and women are seen through a particular societal lens, with expectations of certain behaviours. When masking plays into those expectations, they are more likely to be missed. It is not the mask or the masker at fault, but the expectations and bias of those viewing the masker. A colleague of mine, Eleanor Broadbent, describes it like this. When boys line up cars or toys or nuts and bolts in a perfect logical order, it's called autism. When girls line up shoes or dolls or stuffed toys in a perfect logical order, it's called good housekeeping. Exactly the same presentation, different social expectations. The idea behind the female autism phenotype is that all autistic women present differently to men because their autistic neurology is completely different autistic neurology, and that women and girls have been missed because they are vastly superior maskers. Of course, it has absolutely nothing to do with flawed understanding, sexism, and research. Autistic women and girls need a huge focus, but not at the risk of replacing one myth with another and then blaming them for it. A much better way of looking at autistic presentations is through the narrative of internalizers and externalizers. Some people lean more to internalizing their being autistic. Other people lean more to externalizing being autistic. Co-occurring conditions play a massive part in this already. If you haven't figured it out already, from the pictures, they're both the bedrooms of autistic children, a boy and a girl. The boys' one is the pink one with the cats, by the way, just to keep your confirmation bias in check. So what does all this have to do with masking? Well, because of all these narratives, the view of autistic people is never shown as the slide, the pictures you can see in front of you. This is why the mask exists. We aren't safe, we're voiceless, and we're unseen. And some more unseen than others. So we now have context as to why the mask occurs, but what exactly is it? Autistic masking is a trauma response, a psychological safety mechanism made up of complex layers of physical, emotional, and social actions, which an autistic person is driven to use to self-protect and present an acceptable version of who they are. This occurs by applying, in fluctuating degrees, often uncontextualized and sometimes rehearsed, learnt behaviours to appropriate situations, while simultaneously suppressing both natural behaviours and self-identity, or conversely projecting an exaggerated identity. All this happens partly consciously, with the person quickly learning to dissociate from the act, and from then on, subconsciously, preemptive, reactive and unplanned, and all at great mental and physical cost. I've been tinkering with this definition of masking for years. No matter how much I refine it, it stays centered on these points. A trauma response. Project an acceptable version of self and maintain safety. Applying uncontextualized learnt behaviors. Suppressing natural behaviors and identity. unconscious and conscious, at great cost. The sociologist Erving Goffman nods to the concept of masking in his work. He likens life to a play, with humans as the actors, donning different costumes for different dramatic scenarios. It's a good analogy for life and the adapting we all do in order for those social dynamics to occur. When it comes to autistic masking, things go to far greater extremes. The autistic person is not only the actor in the play, they're also the writer, director, producer, costume designer, makeup artist, ticket seller, and the person who sells you ice cream at the interval. Adaptations to scenarios are tweaks to performances, but fundamentally you are still you. Autistic masking is not you at all. Before we go any further, we need to dispel some myths. What's key to remember here is that masking in the extremes that we're going to talk about is not just reserved for autistic people. How it may display for autistic people and the specific strategies used by autistic people might be unique, but the existence of the mask is across the board for every group that is stigmatized or defined as marginalized. So masking is not just an autistic behavior. Masking is not necessarily about appearing more neurotypical, it's the trauma-fueled projection of an acceptable and expected version of yourself to those around you that keeps you safe. Masking is the fulfillment of confirmation bias, presenting to those around you exactly what they expect to see. Which means that masking is as much about other people as it is the individual. It's about other people's bias and the lenses of ableism, sexism, racism, and narrow and flawed understanding of autism and behavior they look at you through. Masking is a process all autistic people go through regardless of their co-occurring conditions. And masking can also be encouraged through conditioning and compliance. These are examples of the many mechanisms that autistic people can use to engage and uphold the mask. Now, this is based on my own experiences and the experiences of thousands of other autistic people whom I've connected with through the community and who also I've watched and, listened to their conversations. So I'm going to pick out a few, otherwise we'll be here all day. I do whole training sessions on this, but to go through them, we're looking at things like suppression in the extreme, physical suppression, emotional suppression, sensory suppression, suppressing things like pain. Then we look at things like stim redirection or suppression as well. So that's taking stims that you do as a child and holding them in, redirecting them into smaller stims, less noticeable ones, or stopping them altogether, holding yourself still. There's language use here as well, things like scripting and directed echolalia, directed hyperlexia as well, and linguistic masking. There's mirroring other people's behaviors. Physical masking, wearing clothes and makeup that cover up who you are or help you project that acceptable other version of you. Things like personality shifting, exaggerating yourself. This is another one. And this is the bit that's always missing from the narrative of masking. So masking has traditionally been seen about hiding and fitting in and not being identified, when in actual fact, there are many autistic people who exaggerate versions of themselves, become more autistic in inverted commas. Remember, it's about people seeing what they expect to see. If they expect to see an autistic person, some people fulfill that prophecy. The whole thing is framed around the suppression of identity and the dissociation that comes with that over time as you age and as you develop. And we're going to go into that in a little bit more detail. There's also aspects about people pleasing and fawning, saying what you think people want you to say, taking on more than you can cope with, saying yes, which then leaves you being easily manipulated and coerced, makes you more likely to be subjected to abuse, more likely to be in a vulnerable situation. Masking has its origins in the earliest of socialization and is rooted in sensory differences. As one example, if you consider an undiagnosed autistic baby, what if that baby finds touch uncomfortable, or worse, has a sensory response of pain upon touch? Babies are put through a constant cycle of touch. They're picked up, put down, wiped, prodded, cuddled, poked. And what's the only way they can communicate that this is hurting them? They cry. So then what happens? They're picked up, put down, wiped, prodded, cuddled, poked. If you continue that cycle, eventually the baby figures out that no matter what it does, the touching is not going to stop. The baby does not become desensitized. It stops reacting in the unconscious hope that the touching will become minimalized. It's suppressing. It protects itself. It complies. It's already learning how to mask. Later, the child is taken to places filled with other babies and toddlers, groups and nursery and preschool. Amidst the sensory overstimulation of this new environment, the child starts to figure out it's not like the other children, that acting in certain ways causes the child to be punished or singled out by the other children, or that other children act in certain ways that get rewarded. The child finds that complaints about the sensory environment lead to dismissal, if they can even be communicated at all. So they start to mirror the others. There's no context to what they're copying. They just know everyone else is acting in a certain way and gets favoured for it. Eye contact brings praise no matter how much it hurts. Sitting perfectly still brings praise no matter how much you need to move in order to concentrate, and so on. This carries on. The child arrives at school where social situations become more complex and they're put into social skills groups where they're taught how to fit in and make everyone else comfortable, where the sensory environment is more overstimulating, more painful. The expectation to sit and engage and comply increases, and therefore so does the masking. Adults question the child's behaviours when they're deemed negative or inappropriate, and very quickly the child learns not to display them or to over-display them. The child's often dismissed when they complain things are too loud or that their clothes hurt them, so they stop. They struggle to understand the communication that's going on around them, and nobody learns their way of communicating. The expectations and demands placed on the child rise. They're pushed and they either fail or they mask harder. And if they mask harder, what does the teacher see? The quiet boy or girl, the bookish one who avoids attention, or conversely the one eager to please, eager to answer. Either way, they're doing what the teacher needs, so they're left to get on. Masking is effectively holding your breath. The regulation you need to occur does not occur, and eventually you have to breathe or pass out. Autistic children and adults live under a constant narrative so subtle you probably don't even realize you're part of it. Broken and fix. We have to hold our breath because of this invalidating narrative. It lives in bringing confirmation bias to the fore, either in applying social norms that are effectively unachievable for autistic people, by demanding communication which is incomprehensible and denying communication methods that work, and by bringing personal bias around sensory information into play. It exists in phrases like, sit still, quiet hands, look at me, eyes to the front please, it's not that bad. You'll get over it. Stop making such a fuss. They were smiling, so they must like it. Well, it was okay for me. You don't need that. Stop making that noise. But none of those statements take into account the needs and feelings of the individual that's the target of them. In fact, they summarily dismiss their needs or pointedly gaslight the person. I have another example. Laura doesn't like this or that. Now that actually looks like a positive advocation of individual need, but the phrase doesn't like, I've heard it used by so many parents and professionals to describe an autistic person in a sensory response of actual pain. It encourages the dismissal of the individual's needs by downgrading its importance. The irony is that while sitting putting these slides together and thinking about what I wanted to say, I was jigging, hand flapping, bouncing on my chair at times, singing the same line from a song over and over, and regularly had to get up and move around. I'm a 41-year-old man who was diagnosed at 23. My school days were horrific. Even though I knew I needed to do those things at school in order to help me learn and process, I couldn't do them at school because my experience was that I was punished for doing them by both teachers and classmates. I even knew on some level that by not doing them, it made it harder for me to learn. No, I said couldn't do them, not didn't do them. It wasn't a choice. That I do them now is testament to the fact that I recognise what I need to do and do it. I no longer do what I'm told, but it took me nearly 32 years to learn that I was stimming, and what I needed to do was normal and appropriate for me. The word no. Children are never given that option. The invalidation of sensory differences sits alongside how autistic people's communication styles are invalidated, how our behaviour is pathologized and constantly termed as negative, and how much of what is done to us, either through specific behavioural therapies, social skills training, or through invalidation and dismissal, is focused on the normalisation of the autistic person based on what I and others term neuronormative standards. It's this assumption that there is a right way of doing things because society deems that there is a right way of doing things, based not on any evidence, but simply because that's what people do. The issue of this way of thinking is not only flawed, quite frankly, it's enormously egotistical. Many of our social conventions are geographical and change dependent on where you are in the world. Most of those have evolved beyond their original meanings, to the point where most people can't even tell you why they do them. If your neurology is not built in a way that allows you to do what other people do, but in fact wants you to do things in a very different way, but you're constantly told that what you are doing is wrong, or you are told that your reaction is over the top or unnecessary, or that you'll be all right, or don't be so silly, how would that make you feel? The autistic brain has an interest-driven and problem-solving focus. It has a name, monotropism. But if nobody can give you a good reason as to why you are feeling different or why you have problems in your life, and everyone around you is dismissing your feelings or not recognizing your pain, the only solution to this that you can come up with is that you are the problem, that you are broken in some way. To further back this up, when you turn to the literature, when you look at autism through most mediums, it's solely focused on how autistic people are broken, how we fail to communicate properly, how we don't fit in, how we show challenging behavior, how our thoughts and movements and reactions upset other people, and so on. What this does is hand the autistic person, child and adult, an internal narrative of internalized ableism, a voice which says, you can't do this. You shouldn't be like this. This is your fault. The internal voice we inherit from the world around us is, I'm not good enough. I need to change. I need to improve. I need to get better. I need to stop melting down. I need to stop making mistakes. I need to sit still. I need to listen. I need to work harder at being like everyone else. Why do I get picked on? Why am I the only one in pain? Why am I different? I need to understand better. But nobody understands us. Not really. Broken and fixed. We are expected to meet everyone else's demands and needs, many of which don't even make sense. We're put through social skills training so that we can learn to mask and fit in better with everyone else. We're expected to change, to be better versions of ourselves, so we feel wrong. We turn on ourselves and eat ourselves up. We're not like the other kids, but we should be like all the other kids. And all the adults in our lives reinforce that. Subliminally, we're made to feel that we are burdens to our parents because of the constant battle for support. Autism gets the blame for it, so therefore we take on the blame for it. Invalidation. We're made to feel that we're burdens on society by people that talk only about our deficits and do that right in front of us. How many times has a parent gone for an appointment without asked to talk about the challenging behaviour, the traits, the embarrassing things their child has said or done? And the child's right there in the room. Invalidation. School. The single biggest trigger in the life of an autistic child, a stimulatory hellhole, where constant overwhelm is the only feeling available, where reasonable adjustments have to be written in law after an extended and lengthy process, agreed upon by a wodge of different professionals and are rarely enforced, despite the fact that the child is making hundreds of reasonable adjustments just to be in the building. Invalidation. Yet they're expected to get on, to act like the other kids, to wear the uniform that scratches, to put up with the jostling, the constant barrage of noise, the expectation, the inability to keep up. But then they show challenging behaviour. And when they can't take it anymore, their school refuses. It is the child that is constantly framed as the problem. And this is the crux of why the mask exists. This is why our brains take all of this trauma and create a defense mechanism. because being normal equals safety. Well, what's the issue with all of this? Well, the biggest thing is that there is no normal. It doesn't exist, but the world assigns arbitrary targets and objectives and standards based upon the principle that there is a normal. It's a paradox. How can you be something that doesn't exist? The response to that is the mask. The longer it does its job, the better it gets at doing it. The strategies develop and repeat into the adult world and onward. The more complex the situations and relationships, the harder the mask works. The harder it works, the more suppressed the individual underneath becomes, and the stronger they dissociate from it. And the better it gets, the more resources it steals. Layer upon layer of trauma. Layer upon layer of mask responding to trauma. The amount of monotropic singular focus it takes to achieve the mask is immense. The amount of energy that goes into maintaining it is incredible. And the more complex the mask becomes, the more resources it needs to remain sustainable. The more worn down a person is, then the more likely it is that the mask slips or cracks a little temporarily. An example of this would be for the teachers among you when a parent comes to you and tells you of post-school meltdowns and huge changes in behaviour outside of school, when all you see is an angel every day that behaves beautifully, is quiet and does what they're told. A common phrase heard by parents is that a child is fine in school. They aren't fine, they're masking. Teachers usually just don't have the context or the knowledge to see that. This post-school behaviour actually has a name. It's called the Coca-Cola effect because it's comparable to opening a bottle of Coke after shaking it vigorously. At home, the masking child either feels safe enough or exhausted to the point where they cannot sustain the mask, so a day's worth of suppression and pent-up emotion comes flooding out. For some children, either through not feeling safe or through the depths of their mask, unleashing is not possible, so it all gets pushed down deep inside. Often those children are the ones that melt down infrequently. Again, the autistic community tend to refer to people like this, people such as myself, as internalizers. We tend to shut down rather than melt down. For those in the BAME and ethnic communities, an additional layer is added. It's generally unsafe for them ever not to mask because of the issues around how members of those communities are viewed in a society where racism is ingrained. Can you imagine the reaction to a 6-foot-tall black or indigenous man stimming or melting down publicly? The price paid for a day spent masking is exhaustion. This is sometimes described as social burnout or autism fatigue. You may hear it described about children as parents report they shut down after being around people or in unsafe environments, often burying themselves under blankets, sleeping, or mindlessly staring at tablets. The issue is that this way of recharging isn't sufficient. If you think of it in terms of a mobile phone battery, if you only recharge it in short bursts or try to charge without ever switching the phone off, you damage the battery. It never fully charges, and each time you charge it, the charge holds for less time. If the masking autistic person is not given a sustained and lengthy opportunities to withdraw and not mask, or their needs are continuously not met, then it's likely that they will end up in extreme burnout. As you can see, extreme burnout presents in a vast variety of ways. Sometimes all the signs are present, or some of them are present in different extremes. There are things like increased lethargy, irritability, and anxiety, a huge ramp up in sensory oversensitivity, a massive increase in demand avoidance, diminished ability for the individual to regulate their emotional state, leading to an increase in the severity of their shutdowns or meltdowns, or both. An increase in mental rigidity and narrowing of thinking, which coincides with an increase of brain fog and frustration. An increase in stimming, leading to self-injurious behavior. An increase in digestive issues, headaches and migraine, overtiredness, joint pain. A decrease in verbal communication. A need to withdraw more and more. And no ability to mask any of this. You'll notice similarities with what is called autistic regression. There is a school of thought that what is termed regression, which is described as a loss of skills, is actually autistic burnout, and it's a school of thought I'm a member of. What most people feel is confusion and frustration because of the lack of research into this. Unless they've engaged with the autistic community, they won't even know what's happening to them. This is a phenomenon that has been repeatedly described amongst autistic adults and children for decades, yet because of that lack of research and a complete lack of understanding of autism masking and burnout, it's often misdiagnosed as depression. It's only just started to be identified in research. Burnout can lead to depression, certainly, but it's never identified separately by professionals. I'm sure many of you can recognize these symptoms from autistic children you know or have worked with, or have been reported on by parents, or maybe even within your children or you. In fact, any of you that have been around someone who has been termed a school refuser, I would seriously recommend exploring the potential that they may be autistic and that they may be going through a period of autistic burnout and unable to mask anymore. It isn't school refusal. All that does is place the blame on the child. Language matters. Let's place the onus on the real reason. It's school-induced anxiety or school-induced trauma. Because then we can stop blaming parents for being weak, for not having firm boundaries, and stop dismissing as irrational the very real anxiety, terror, and sensory overload experienced by these children, and end the current practice of forcing attendance through flooding. If a teacher or a social worker has work-related stress, they can go and get a sick note for 3 months. When a child has school-induced trauma, they get literally dragged there and expected to stay there. We place expectations on autistic children that we don't even apply to ourselves as adults. And people wonder why masking happens. The model of acceptance is an excellent ideological platform upon which to build support for a masking autistic child or adult. The neurodiversity paradigm, which recognises the validity of everyone being an individual and some having neurologies that work differently to others. Diversity in social intelligence is a concept built on a study from DART in Edinburgh. It recognises that communication comes in many varied ways and that all of those ways are equally important and need validation. Specifically, that autistic communication is generally efficient and works well amongst autistic people. It's insisting that autistic people engage in non-autistic styles of communication that cause the problem. And to underpin all of this, the role of Dr. Damien Milton's double empathy problem is so important because, when viewed through the lens of autism, it sets up autistic masking and the attitudes of society to autistic people perfectly. I've been talking about the double empathy problem all through this talk, but it's the first time I've named it. Please do go look it up. This notion that there is one way of doing things and one way of being is wrong, no matter whose perspective you do it from. If you consider the real lack of understanding of what autism actually is and the ignorance that puts a vast array of co-occurring conditions under the umbrella term of autism, the lack of understanding of trauma, the lack of understanding of the sensory system, the lack of understanding of neurology, the research underpinned by decades of mistakes and flaws, but yet everyone who is not autistic is quite happy to categorize us, talk over us, dismiss us, tell us what's wrong with us, and decide how we need to be fixed. It is ironic because we are accused of having no or very little empathy for others, when in truth, others have no or very little empathy for us. They're too busy deciding what we need and ignore us when we say that's not what we need. Recognizing those flaws and the poorly informed historical narrative that feeds them is key because it underpins everything which is wrong, and without that context, you can't ever claim to adequately support an autistic person or meet their needs. Whether that autistic person understands this narrative or not is kind of irrelevant because they still suffer under the weight of it every day, knowing or not. Learning to discriminate between what is useful and what is not useful is utterly key. It's fundamental to learn to evaluate whether a source is coming from a positive and constructive place built around the model of acceptance, or whether it is a reinforcement of stereotypes and or a reinforcement of what society thinks, not what autistic people need. Fitting in is not the answer. Learning to exist in the real world is not the answer. If your neurology dictates that that is not how you can live, then it should be understood, acknowledged, accepted, and others supported to recognize and celebrate the fact that it's okay that you are different to them. Ultimately, it's about validation and the recognition that there is not one way of doing things or even close to a right way of doing things. It's recognizing that our confirmation bias and preconceived notions play not only a huge part in the invalidation of autistic people, but are specifically grounded in the failure to recognize the needs of autistic people from an autistic perspective. Because then, instead of furiously trying to measure us up against neuronormative standards that we cannot meet, or that we try to meet through masking which actively harms us, we can start focusing on a strengths model that recognizes both the positive and negative aspects of our sensory system and looks at how we need to work with that to help us thrive in whatever way that looks for us as individuals. And usually done, that's by accepting our monotropic focus and engaging with us for our interests. We need the control and autonomy that is denied us. We need that moment of equity to be achieved and sustained. Our autistic selves need to be looked at with value by others and by us. And maybe one day we can stop having so much trauma inflicted on us that our brains don't feel the need to subconsciously decide that it has to knock out the driver, engage stealth mode, and take part in action that is being shown to have a direct link to the ridiculously high suicide rate of autistic people.
Autism Canada ambassadors are a valued member of the team. They contribute in multiple ways, including writing for our Sharing the Spectrum newsletter and supporting our family services team. If you are on the spectrum and would like to learn more about becoming an Autism Canada ambassador, please email us at info@autismcanada.org.
Les ambassadeurs et ambassadrices d'Autisme Canada sont des membres très appréciés de notre équipe. Ils contribuent de plusieurs manières, notamment en écrivant pour notre bulletin d'information Sharing the Spectrum et en soutenant notre équipe de support aux familles. Si vous êtes sur le spectre et souhaitez en savoir plus sur la façon de devenir ambassadeur et ambassadrice d'Autisme Canada, veuillez nous envoyer un courriel à info@autismecanada.org.
We'd like to acknowledge and thank our media partner, Daily Hive. Thanks so much for all of your support. Daily Hive is a Canadian-born news source established in 2008 that creates compelling, hyper-local content. Daily Hive embraces the unique qualities that exist in a city and reports it to produce genuine conversations among communities.
Partenaire média, Daily Hive est une source d'information d'origine canadienne établie en 2008 qui crée un contenu hyper local, captivant. Daily Hive célèbre les qualités uniques qui existent dans chacune des villes et apporte de l'information pour produire de véritables conversations entre les communautés.
Show us your awesome. Art by Sultan Edwards.
Montrez-nous votre awesome. Peinture par Sultan Edwards.
Sultan Edwards is 24, lives in Ontario, and enjoys playing guitar, painting, and playing basketball.
Sultan Edwards a 24 ans, vit en Ontario et aime jouer de la guitare, peindre et jouer au basketball.
Michael Tanzer. Michaelism. My POV on life with autism.
Michael Tanzer, une lecture de Michaelism, My POV on Life with Autism.
Michael Tanzer is a young adult with autism. He is a high school graduate from Thornlea Secondary School and also an autism spectrum disorder advocator who has written several articles for Autism Matters magazine and has also published his own book called Michaelism, My POV on Life with Autism. This book is based on his own personal experiences, and he is sharing his point of view, POV, on life with autism. He hopes that the readers will gain a better understanding of individuals with ASD and provide a voice to those who are often never heard. Michael also recently launched his own podcast show called The Real Michael Tanzer Presents Michaelism, and it can be listened to on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Michael Tanzer est un jeune homme sur le spectre. Il a un diplôme d'études secondaires de l'école secondaire Thornlea et est également un défenseur pour le trouble du spectre de l'autisme, TSA, qui a écrit plusieurs articles pour le magazine Autism Matters et également publié son propre livre intitulé Michaelism, My POV on Life with Autism. Ce livre est basé sur ses propres expériences personnelles et il partage son point de vue POV sur la vie avec l'autisme. Il espère que ses lecteurs et lectrices acquériront une meilleure compréhension des personnes atteintes de TSA et qu'ils ou elles fourniront une voix à ceux qui ne sont pas souvent entendus. Michael a également récemment lancé son propre balado intitulé The Real Michael Tanzer Presents Michaelism et il peut être écouté sur Spotify et Apple Podcasts.
Hey everyone, hey, Yamina, Michael Tanzer desu. I'm the author who wrote Michaelism, My POV on Life with Autism, and today I'm going to be reading some of the parts of my book. So sit back, relax, and enjoy reading the parts of my book. Michaelism, My POV on Life with Autism was written based on my own personal experiences having autism spectrum disorder, ASD. I was diagnosed when I was 3 years old when I was in preschool, and let me tell you something. It has not been an easy road. I have worked hard with my family and other professionals who have supported me throughout my whole life and continue to help me. This book is filled with many different topics that I have a POV for short on. It is about what I think based on my experiences with having autism. I wanted to share my own opinions with you while you're reading my book. My POV might be different than your POV, and that is okay because everyone has their own opinions based on their own experiences. Everyone with autism is different. This book is not intended to provide you with any professional or advice, but still, I do hope you learn something about ASD after reading it. To be honest with you all, I do hope it helps provide some understanding to the mind of those who have ASD. People with autism should be accepted instead of being thought of as a different in a negative way. You may find there are some grammar mistakes and even pronunciation mistakes, and that is okay. And this is how I speak. I like to call it Michaelism. Another reason why I call it Michaelism, it is because I do not understand a lot of vocabulary and grammar. The English language can be so confusing. So I hope you can manage to read and understand what I have written and my point that I am trying to tell you. Why edit how the mind of a person with autism thinks. You will also find Japanese expressions throughout the book. This is because it is a language I taught myself. Anyway, I would like to offer special thanks to my loved ones, my family, and my relatives, my friends, and my therapist. You have helped me make my dreams come true by believing me and supporting me through this writing process. I would like to give additional thanks to Jen Arnold for helping me with some of the editing and her assistance during the entire writing process. I hope you enjoy reading this book as much as I enjoyed writing it. Sincere, Michael Tanzer, ASDB Advocate. Now I will be reading a chapter from my book, a chapter that I wrote called My POV on Accepting My Autism. How do you accept autism? How can people with ASD accept themselves? The bigger question, how can you not? Sad but true. It has taken a long time for me to accept my being on the spectrum. Many times when things in my life were hard, I would just blame my autism. I would say to my family that I hate autism or having autism sucks. Am I wrong? I may have even said that I wish I was never born, but to accept my autism, I had to learn so many things throughout my whole life. First, I have to come out of my shell. I have to know about my diagnosis and understand what it means for me. So if you want to accept your autism, then you need to learn all about it. Learning first, acceptance later. The most important thing I can tell you is that everyone is different. I have lots of friends who have autism, and we're all different. How can you learn about people on the spectrum? So, here are some tips if you want to learn about autism. 1, hang out with people who have autism, the most helpful. 2, read books about autism, for example, Temple Grandin. Or watch TV shows, movies, or documentaries about autism. Or take a course about autism or psychology. Once I learned about autism, I realized what my talents were, and of course, what my challenges are. At times, it was to separate what I thought was a challenge to that offers might have from what I thought was a challenge because of my autism. In the end, I've learned what it really doesn't matter. They are part of me, and this understanding has helped me to better accept that autism is just one part of who I am, right? So, how do you accept autism? Set goals for yourself and write them ASAP. Keep a journal of yourself or write down all of your talents. Take speech courses if that helps you. It did for me. Take courses in acting improve. Join a social skills group or autism support group. I did this and it was extremely helpful. Be strong, believe in yourself, spend time with people who care about you. Think 100%. Think 100% positive always. Let go of your negativity always. Do not give up. Never. Be happy being you. If you have autism, accept yourself the way you are and be proud of yourself and your outstanding abilities. There is nothing wrong with you being on the spectrum. You are you. You can do whatever you want as long as you're not blaming yourself or autism. There are a lot of good things in your life. Remember that you do not have to do it alone. There are a lot of people fighting for people with autism in their rights. There will be difficult days, even weeks, but never give up the fight. The truth is, you must believe in yourself no matter what you do. Giving on autism is not an option at all. Instead, you must be positive by standing up for yourself and for your own friends and for your family. Seek your happiness, your passion, your interest, and your road to success. Go for it. Do not give up until you reach for the top. Anything that's possible. Do it. Do it for the world. Do it for yourself. Autism is the best. I hope you enjoyed reading the parts of my book. If you're interested in getting my book can be bought on Amazon, Google Play, and Apple Books. Thank you for listening to my book reading.
Show us you're awesome. Kieran Piment is a 16-year-old on the autism spectrum and is an Autism Canada ambassador. Kieran is a self-taught pianist. He shares a special song for Autism Canada as we celebrate our 45th anniversary.
Kieran Piment est un jeune de 15 ans sur le spectre de l'autisme et est ambassadeur d'Autisme Canada. Kieran est un pianiste autodidacte et il partagera une chanson spéciale pour Autisme Canada alors que nous célébrons notre 40e anniversaire.
Hi, my name is Kieran. I am the ambassador of Autism Canada. Happy 45th birthday of Autism Canada. Thank you, Autism Canada.
Minni, a conversation about employment and hiring practices.
Parler des pratiques d'emploi et d'embauche.
Minni was diagnosed with level 1 autism a few years ago, although she has, of course, been autistic all her life. She is employed full-time as a software developer by a great Canadian company, Kinaxis, and she was hired through their Autism at Work program, intermediated by another great Canadian nonprofit human resource agency that specializes in work placements. Minni emigrated to Canada in 2009, although she was previously here for several years as a young child. She has a PhD in computer applications, as well as degrees in music and physics. She has worked in exceptionally diverse fields, including academia, as a professional musician, in broadcasting, and as a youth worker. She has run her own music production startup company, been a freelance iOS developer, a consultant for academic and research development, and even spent a year driving a big yellow school bus. Minni lives in Ottawa with her spouse Sophia, their teenage daughter, and 3 dogs.
Minni a reçu un diagnostic d'autisme de niveau 1 il y a quelques années, bien qu'elle ait, bien sûr, été autiste toute sa vie. Elle est employée à temps plein en tant que développeuse de logiciels pour une grande entreprise canadienne, Keynote, et elle a été embauchée dans le cadre de leur programme Autism at Work, intermédiaire d'une grande agence canadienne de ressources humaines à but non lucratif spécialisée dans le placement d'emplois. Minni a émigré au Canada en 2009, bien qu'elle a été déjà séjournée pendant plusieurs années alors qu'elle était une jeune enfant. Elle est titulaire d'un doctorat en application informatique ainsi que diplômée en musique et en physique. Elle a travaillé dans des domaines exceptionnellement divers, y compris le milieu universitaire en tant que musicienne professionnelle, dans la radiodiffusion et en tant qu'intervenante auprès des jeunes. Elle dirige sa propre start-up de production musicale, a été développeuse iOS indépendante, une consultante pour le développement académique et de la recherche et a même passé un an à conduire un gros autobus scolaire jaune. Minni vit à Ottawa avec son épouse, Sophia, leur fille adolescente et 3 chiens.
Hi there. My name's Julie, and I work at Autism Canada. A couple of weeks ago, I had the pleasure of speaking with one of our autism ambassadors, Minni, about her perspectives on employment and current hiring practices. It was a really interesting conversation, and I learned so much, and I really appreciate Minni taking the time to talk to me. This is a recording of our conversation, and I hope you enjoy it.
According to Statistics Canada a few years back, that 75% of autistic adults are unemployed, and that is a bad thing. So obviously, whatever help or whatever is being offered right now is not working, because if it was working, there wouldn't be 75% unemployment. And the key thing here that autistic adults need to understand is the issue is actually not with them. The issue is with the employers. So number one, the first thing I think that an autistic adult who is unemployed needs to do is they need to enroll themselves with Specialist Earner, because that is the employment agency that helps place people on the spectrum, and they do an extremely good job as far as I'm concerned, because what they do is they screen for ability. The way Specialist Earner does it is they look at your potential, which is completely different. The traditional way of people applying for jobs is to look behind and say, oh, well, I've done this, and therefore I will be able to do that. And with an autistic person, this does not apply, because a lot of the times in the past, what we have done has been limited by what people have allowed us to do. And I know as an autistic adult myself that I can speak very well now, but I'm over 50 now, and I can articulate things. When I was younger, I could not. And it was something that I have learned over time to do. Another thing I think that is a misconception among non-autistic people is that, well, okay, there's 2 things here. First of all, yes, autism is something that you're born with, and it's a lifelong thing. But it's not true to say that autistic people cannot learn things. Our learning path is different than other people's learning paths. That's why sometimes it may take us longer to get to a place, but it doesn't mean we can't get there. And sometimes we could get much further along the path than someone who has had a smooth path all along, because they were just walking on the straight road, whereas ours went here and there and there and there. And by the time we get there, it seems like we're slow, but then you might find we actually have potential to go much further down this road than someone who just had a straight, easy path all the time. I'm not saying that every non-autistic person has it easy in their life. I'm not saying this. What I'm saying is that the way the whole employment infrastructure is set up, it is geared to neurotypical people. Like for myself, I have had a lot of different jobs, and they have all been good jobs. The thing is, I have a certain level of ability in a lot of different areas. So it actually makes it not impossible for me to get a job. But when I emigrated to Canada, and I'm an immigrant, I emigrated here now it's 12 years. But the really hard thing about applying for a job was that my resume was like all over the place, because I came here from a country where obviously wherever you grow up in, you have contacts. So like I got my first job because my dad knew somebody, and then I proved myself in that job, and therefore I got my next job when somebody said, oh, I heard about this person, so let's give her a job. And then when I emigrated here, I was working for a university at the time, and they kept me on for a number of years. But then eventually, of course, all good things come to an end, and I had to apply for a job. And then that's when I ran into all these enormous roadblocks. It's nothing to do with my capability, but it's to do with, well, they expect you to have a resume that's tailored in a certain way and has a whole bunch of job experience in the same area that you are going to apply, including qualifications. Now, that didn't work for me because I had 3 different degrees in 3 different fields, completely different. I have a degree in physics, I have a degree in music, and I have a degree in computer applications. So they're all over the place. Yeah. And this is often true for autistic people because we have interests. And when we have an interest, we follow our interests. And then if it results in a degree, fine, or a diploma or whatever. If it results in a job, fine. And if it doesn't, also fine. A lot of autistic people have a lot more knowledge about topics than somebody who claims they have a degree in it. I mean, I have met people I know who have PhDs in something, and I know more than them in that area, simply because it was my pet interest at some point, and I followed it all the way, and I learned everything about it. And a lot of autistic people are like this. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, when it came to this point in Canada, I completely could not apply for a job because my resume includes experience in really, really different domains. And if I put it down on paper, it sounded not believable. Well, then people give you the typical advice. I went to the employment agency and they give you the typical advice. Oh yeah, well then you can go back to school. I said, I'm not going back to school. I already have 3 degrees. Why do I need to get another one? It's ridiculous. Yeah. I can learn whatever I want. So I taught myself yet another skill, which was my current job. I taught myself some computer programming by just doing online courses and stuff. A lot of autistic people are able to do this. They're able to pick up things that are their pet interest, whatever it might be. And they might not necessarily have the work experience or even the paper qualification with a degree or whatever, but they have the ability. They know how to do things and they know about these things. The other thing about that was that, and again, I think this is an issue with autistic people. We tell things as we see them. So it's hard sometimes because I think, I feel one of the distinguishing factors between us and neurotypical people is we don't really have this ability to hold in, or it's very hard in a sense that if we know how to do something and then our boss is somebody who actually doesn't know, we will tend to just speak up and say, well, that's wrong. Right. And neurotypical bosses don't like that. I didn't want to put myself in that situation. I already knew about being in a situation where you're in a position where you know so much more than your boss. And it's like, why would I want to do that? No, I'd rather not do that. So instead, what I did was I decided to take a job that I knew absolutely nothing about and learn yet another new thing, which was very easy to get. So I took on a school bus driver job at one point. And I actually drove a school bus for you because I'd never driven a large vehicle and I knew nothing about blue collar jobs because I've always had white collar jobs. And so I spent a year and then I found out that, well, it's actually an autistic person's nightmare to drive a school bus. Well, there were two aspects of it. The first one was how extremely cold it gets in winter because the bus takes an hour to heat up. And so my fingers started cracking and I tried all sorts of things and I couldn't stop it, no matter using heated gloves, double gloves, triple gloves, all kinds of things. And I'm a pianist. So I couldn't play the piano anymore. So that was, to me, a nightmare. And then the second thing was, once it started getting to spring, the kids were no longer quiet in the bus.
Right.
But I finished 1 year, and then I said, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. So that's when I discovered Specialist Learner. So I signed up with them. And they were, I mean, great, because when we went for the interview, you know, they placed us, and they've got to let us play with Lego. And they said, okay, here's a bunch of Lego, and you play with it, and then, you know, you have to build a robot, and then the robot has to do certain things. And, you know, so this is the kind of interview I like, because you're just in the room with these toys, and you do what you do, which is what autistic people are really good at doing, is, I think, putting things in order. So we can spot patterns, we can structure things in order. Some people can build, and I'm one of them. So I was able to build great Lego, and I built my robot. And from here, by spotting your potential, then, you know, they do have their own process of interview. They talk to you, but they're all familiar with us, so they know how to talk to us. And then, you know, that's how I got the inroad to join this tech company that I'm in now. So I've been here now for 2 years, and after the first year, I mean, I got promoted even. So it's not just, I've actually got promoted twice now, because initially when they took me in after the Specialist Learner thing, it was like a probationary appointment, but then very quickly they gave me a permanent job, and then within a year they promoted me. So I've been doing well, and the thing is, I would never have gotten into this job if not for Specialist Learner opening the door. So because when you look at the normal paths of entry to this company, and I hadn't seen their advertisements before, there's no way I could have applied, because I didn't meet any of their requirements. You talk about the so-called resume and the interview process, there's no way I could have passed any of that. And yet now I'm in there, they find that, hey, it's actually worthwhile to let people like her in, because she can really contribute. And the thing here is that I think we do need help to get in the door. Okay, so that's the first step. We don't really need help to write another resume that is going to be meaningless anyway. What we need is, we need help to get in the door. Once you get in the door, okay, now once you're in the door, what do? You have to focus on what you can do, what you're good at. And I know that all autistic people are good at pattern recognition. It's why little kids line up their toys. It's why people organize their stuff. So this pattern recognition, and this is where I was saying I wanted to talk to parents as well. If you have autistic children, you have to recognize your kids' strength. Autistic people are the best people to do things like computer programming, to do things like be a librarian, to do things like be in charge of inventory management, to do things like analyze data in research science, to do things like accountancy, keeping the books and numbers straight. So it really depends on the individual. Some people are good at math, some are not. But some people are good at music. And that's why the music part of it, I mean, I initially, when I was young, it was music that drew me. That's why my first degree is, one of my first degrees is in music, because music is something that helps me to organize my thoughts, because my thoughts are everywhere. And when you play, I mean, I guess if you're non-autistic, maybe you'd straight away jump in and play Chopin and stuff. But when I was little, what I liked to play are the exercises, because they're like structured. So if you're a child or a young person, or even an adult, if you're musically inclined, work on your instrument. Even right now, I keep my recorder on my desk. And when I get too stressed, I'll just take it out and play lots of exercises. Some people could be autistic people, they could make great musicians. Autistic people could make great, like I said, if they're good in math, they could make great accountants, because it's bookkeeping. You keep your numbers in order. You can spot the things. If you like, you can write blocks of code. Then you can do programming. You can also do things like hacking. And now they have ethical hacking. It's a whole field. Things like internet security. This is another thing, to be able to look at reams and reams, screenfuls of data, and spot where's that little thing that looks out of place. This is what we're good at doing. You could work in something like, for example, if you were a pharmacy assistant and they have to go and put all those medicine bottles on the shelves and they have to be in order. These are kinds of jobs that I think autistic people are probably the best people to do it, because we have that attention to detail and that ability to sort things. And your kid that arranges stuff can go and arrange things in a job. So the thing about employment is we have to look at what people are good at. Right now the whole structure is wrong. They always look at what you're weak at, and then they try to build you up in the weak thing. I'm not saying you can that, but actually you could ignore your weakness altogether, because if you're horribly weak in that, but you're extremely good in something else, somebody else will be hired to compensate your weakness. It doesn't matter. I think it's really inappropriate to counsel an autistic person to go into retail, for example. People at the cash register, 99% of neurotypicals will expect you to make eye contact and talk to them nicely. And well, I can't do it. I don't know. Maybe there are some. Why put yourself to be a receptionist or a front store manager? You can't. That's not our strength. We should be placing our autistic inside jobs which need them. This is not about giving us say, oh, well, there's other people who can do this job better. It's not, actually. If you think about it from the employer's perspective, you want the best person for the job. Why would you put someone to do something that requires meticulous attention to detail, someone who has problems with attention, or for someone who would much rather be out there mingling with people? People need to start thinking about putting people where their strengths are. The jobs have certain requirements. Place the people in the right job. Right. So as far as the autistic adults are concerned, they know what they're good in. All of us have at some point, either you've arranged something or organized something, or you might also take it one step further. You like to put things in order in the sense of building them. Like, I build things all the time, not just Lego. I build miniatures, and I expanded that as I got older. Now I do DIY. I fix everything around the house because I like to put things in structure and order. I think autistic people would make amazing librarians, for instance, because you would remember where the books are on the shelves. You would remember how to put them back and how this Dewey Decimal System works. So these are the kinds of jobs that really should be open to us. Companies that are hiring those that don't have a policy for autism, you're actually missing out on a population that can do certain kinds of jobs extremely well. And when you say that, well, the important thing is how you present yourself at the interview, think about, what are you hiring these people for? Are you hiring them to put on a show for an interviewer, or are you hiring them to actually do certain specific work that you need? The best companies, like my own employer, understands the fact that, well, the job that needs to be done requires A, B, C, D, and E skills. Therefore, these are the things that we will filter for. And we understand that there are people with A, B, C, D, and E skills who don't have the skill of presenting themselves nicely at an interview. Even for me, it's like, if you put me, I can talk to you one-to-one like this, fine. But if you have like a whole bunch of people and all of them are shooting a bunch of questions at me, I wouldn't do well, because there's going to be too many voices and too many inputs all at the same time. The companies that are hiring need to understand what is required of the jobs that they want done. Right now, a lot of them, they hire based on, well, you have a great interview, you talk nicely, you impress me, but they are certainly not the best ones to be hired to do things that require meticulous attention to detail, creativity, and that sort of thing. As far as the autistic person is concerned, what can we do? Build up a portfolio of what you can do. So like in my case, I was interested at that point in time in software development, so I just made my own iPhone apps. I didn't really sell them. Nobody was paying me to make them, but I built them so that once I got my foot in the door, I was able to show, look, this is something I built. If you do software, you can do that, sure. But if you don't build software, you have to have some way to document the things that you're good at doing. So, and focus on what you're good at doing. Don't focus on what you're not good at doing. If you let us focus on what we can do well, we have lots of things to offer. Because I went into this company through the Autism at Work channel, and I was recruited through Specialist Turnout. Everybody knows I'm autistic. Yes, I'm open and out at work in that sense, but there are companies that are very hostile. And actually, before I got this job, I had tried for a different job, and this was before I knew about Specialist Turnout. And I thought I was going to get the job because I could do everything they wanted. And then at the last minute, they didn't want to hire me. And maybe it's because I told them I was autistic, and that they said that there were certain things that they said, well, I should have known. And it was all to do with like social type of things. They say like, I should have known to talk in this way, or I should have. And to me, it didn't make sense. But the thing is, these companies that if you already have a job, and the job, if they are discriminatory against people with a diagnosis, then it's probably better not to confess that you are autistic, because they'll probably hold it against you. On the other hand, if you're working in that kind of environment, you probably hate the job anyway, so you should probably enroll with Specialist Learner and get them to find you a job with a better company that actually has more understanding people in charge.
Right.
As far as anyone who's autistic, who's unemployed, build up your portfolio. I think that's important. Show what you can do. And don't worry so much about what you can't do. That's where people like Autism Canada and Specialist Learner are there to help us. And then for parents who have children who are autistic, you really need to help them. Like for me, I discovered a lot of things by accident. So parents of autistic children understand that your child is really good at spotting patterns. So now what does this mean? Doesn't mean that they have to be a coder, but they could be. You have to look at the jobs that require meticulous attention to detail, that require the ability to spot patterns. So like I said, chat and then introduce your child to all of these in turn. This is called proper career guidance. There are lots of great jobs: bankers, research scientists, data scientists, like is it computer development, engineering if they like to build. You know, I think now in hindsight, I would have been a perfect fit as an engineer, but nobody ever thought to introduce me to this field when I was younger. And being autistic, I never knew to ask.
Right.
This is the other thing. My daughter now, who is not autistic, she knows how to ask all these questions. Every time she asks me stuff, I'm amazed that she knows to ask these things herself. You know, she's looking for options. What should she do when she goes to university? When I was a kid, I never thought of any of these things. It was more like what was presented to me, and it's like, you pick from these options. I never thought to research other things by myself. It never crossed my mind. And I think for a lot of autistic children, they won't know. They won't know that they love to play an instrument until you introduce it to them.
Right.
And also parents should know that not every instrument is equal. Your child likely you might have a kid who would hate to play the piano, but would love to play the drums. You don't know this until you introduce them to stuff. Take them, for example, for music, take them to a concert and let them see a whole bunch of instruments. Take them to an orchestra concert where there's like 100 instruments at the same time. And usually kids will gravitate to something. And if they say, well, I like that sound, and then you find them the right teacher. Music is great because it helps it provides a form of scaffolding. Because when I was younger, I couldn't express my feelings well. And I think when I was in my 20s, I learned how to do songwriting. And then I found I was able to express myself through songs. Now I've kind of matured beyond that. I can actually just talk to you. But when I was younger, anything to do with feelings, I'd have to write it in a song. And if I had not discovered songwriting, I wouldn't have been able to do that. So some kids might find the scaffolding that music provides very helpful because it helps to organize things. Others, if they like I say, if they like numbers, or if you have a kid that likes arranging their toy trucks or something like that, try to get them into something where sorting, like I said, data science is great, statistics, analysis of numbers, or library science is a great one, where there's lots of things that need organizing. Right now, the knowledge economy has got lots of things that to do with information science, information technology, databases. Databases are like when you have tons of details, how do you organize these properly? And how do you relate this whole things that are under this whole bucket in A, under bucket in B and C, and then how do you actually sort them? These are all careers that are in huge demand in the knowledge economy, and autistics are the best people to do them because we have that attention to detail. So expose your kid to all these different kinds of things: careers with numbers, careers with music, careers with patterns, careers with research, careers with analysis. these are all they're really good jobs too, right? And so get your autistic kid, toys that allow them to explore further the kinds of things they're interested in, instead of trying to push them to do stuff that every kid is doing because, well, every kid is doing it. Well, 99% of the kids, they don't have the same challenges, neither do they have the same strengths. So we always have to focus on the strengths and not on the weaknesses. I think what's important is we have to we have to change that statistic. It shouldn't be 75% people unemployed. That's wrong.
Yeah.
And that's Canada's loss, because all these people who have all these abilities are not using their abilities. And of course, it's also the autistic community. All of us who are in here end up frustrated, depressed, and all that. And it's really unfair, and it shouldn't be like that. I mean, it's a win-win situation. I think Autism Canada really has a role to play to educate employers, because employers need to understand, there are people who can do these jobs, and they need to start looking at what they actually need to be done, instead of having ridiculous kind of barriers that mean nothing to the actual job. The kid who has been sitting in their basement building Lego is probably going to be a much better engineer than someone who is not a natural engineer and who went through and has all these things on their resume. But this kid instinctively already knows how to build structures that won't collapse. So why not give this kid a chance? That's why the employers who are hiring need to look at what is the job that you really want, and then identify that with how do you find the people who have these skills. What's in it for you is you get people who have genuine ability in this area. It's not like something just propped up, but it's intrinsically part of who an autistic person is. I saw a documentary about a guy who, he went up in a helicopter, and then he just looks down at the city. When he comes back, he can draw everything. But other than that, he's nonverbal. He can't do a lot of stuff. But I mean, that ability by itself is worth, hundreds of other people's jobs,
right?
Because he can do that alone. Start to recognize this. They start to employ the people who are amazing at something, and then you can always hire the other people to cover the other bases. So what if he can't write reports? Get someone to write his report for him. The thing is, he can do this thing amazingly.
Yeah.
And this is how we have to start framing it. I think right now a lot of stuff that's put in by non-autistics, and it's them thinking, well, we should do this, that, and that will help the autistic people. And it's often incorrect. The more you get autistic people's input, the more you'll find that some things, you're approaching it from the wrong perspective. And it's time, I think, now to reframe these things. Because we need to start making real progress. 75% unemployment is not acceptable.
No, I agree
it's
with
really
you.
not.
I'm just grateful for your experience and for you sharing and teaching me.
Well, yeah, anything I can do to help. Okay.
I hope we can talk again sometime. Thanks, Minni.
Bye.
Take care. Coming up next, Bruce Petherick, How to Deal with Authority Figures. Sam and Anthony Holness, Raising Autism Awareness Through Sport.
Présentateur et présentatrice à venir, Bruce Petherick, Comment gérer les figures d'autorité. Sam et Anthony Holness, La sensibilisation à l'autisme par le sport.
It's time for another quick break and some more music from Bruce. We'll see you back here in 5.
Nous voudrions vous signaler que nous allons recommencer dans environ 5 minutes.
Show us you're awesome. Carl Parker, artist, author, and autism advocate.
Montrez-nous votre awesome, Carl Parker, artiste, auteur, défendeur de l'autisme.
A prolific Canadian artist, author, and autism advocate whose unique style combines elements of abstraction, impressionism, surrealism, and realism. His stunning works can be found in homes and businesses throughout the world. Visit his website for more, www.parkerart.ca.
Un artiste canadien prolifique, auteur et défenseur de l'autisme dont le style unique combine des éléments d'abstraction, d'impressionnisme, de surréalisme et de réalisme. Ses œuvres étonnantes peuvent être trouvées dans les maisons et les entreprises du monde entier. Be kind.
Autism Canada's cozy hoodies, t-shirts, and long-sleeve shirts are a great way to support the autism community in Canada.
Soutenez la communauté avec un chandail à capuchon confortable, un t-shirt ou t-shirt à manches longues.
You can get yours at our online store.
Vous pouvez vous procurer le vôtre sur notre boutique en ligne à
www.collingwoodmerchco.com. Click Shop, click Autism Canada. Take a look at all our items there. We'll be back in 1 minute.
Nous serons de retour dans environ 1 minute.
Bruce Petherick, How to Deal with Authority Figures.
Comment gérer les figures d'autorité?
Bruce Petherick is proudly autistic and is an autistic advocate. He is a teacher, musician, and a creator of acoustic spaces living in Calgary, Canada. He has performed music around the world, playing various styles from classical to jazz and musical theater. He is married to Meredith, an artist and a social worker, and is a parent to 3 children, 2 of whom are also neurodiverse. As well as being an active performer and composer, he has taught at tertiary institutions in both his home country of Australia and in his new home of Canada.
Bruce Petherick est fièrement autiste et est un défenseur pour les personnes sur le spectre de l'autisme. Il est professeur, musicien et créateur d'espaces acoustiques vivant à Calgary, Canada. Il a joué de la musique dans le monde entier, jouant divers styles, du classique au jazz, au théâtral musical. Il est marié à Meredith, artiste et travailleuse sociale, et ils sont parents de 3 enfants, dont 2 sont également neurodivergents. En plus d'être musicien, interprète et compositeur actif, il a enseigné dans des établissements d'enseignement supérieur à la fois dans son pays d'origine, l'Australie, et aussi ici au Canada, son nouveau pays.
Hello, my name is Bruce Petherick and I am proudly autistic. I was diagnosed about 5 years ago and since then have been involved in a lot of autism advocacy. I've worked as a musician for over 40 years all over the world, but now I see my autism advocacy as my day job. Today, I would like to talk to you about dealing with authority figures. Before I start, I am recording this on the day of Truth and Reconciliation, and in that spirit, I would like to give a land acknowledgement. In a spirit of reconciliation, I acknowledge that we work, live and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, the Kainai, the Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, and the Stoney Nakoda Nations, and also the Métis Nations Region 3, and old people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. We are all treaty people. Who are authority figures? For this presentation, I considered government officials, judges, teachers, or professors. But I'm going to use the police as the example here. The tips I give today are relevant for any interaction with an authority figure, and I hope these will help you make these interactions easy to negotiate. Unfortunately, I grew up during my teenage and early adult years in an area where many of the police were corrupt. As I got older and learned of the corruption through friends and also personal contact with the police, and later as corruption inquiries were created by the government, I became less and less trusting of the institution. Fundamentally, I strongly believe in law. I am autistic after all, and highly respect what police officers do and that they endanger themselves to protect the public. I have just experienced times when my trust in them have not been reciprocated. Funnily enough, I am now related to one active police officer and one retired officer. My friend, whom I shall call V in this presentation, has recently started to inform people of his autism discovery. He has known he has been autistic for several years, but is only now starting to feel comfortable sharing this with some people. He is at the very early stage of his autism discovery and is learning things about himself and autism daily. V is an actor and was, over the summer of 2021, offered a role in a show in a rural part of the province. He didn't know very much about the contract, but other performers at his school had told him they had done the show over the previous few years, and it was a good way to save money for his upcoming year. I had originally offered to drive him, as I needed a break from being cooped up at home, but he ended up going with another actor who was also performing in the show. Within the first few days of the rehearsal period, V was verbally abused by the producer of the show because of his body type, but more importantly for this presentation, because of his autism. When he started to challenge this producer, the producer told him that they had been a teacher for 30 years and knew all about autism, and that they also didn't think autism was a disability. On a side note, V and I had just taken part in a musical writing sprint, and we had to deal with a writer from another team that informed us that she was a psychologist and knew everything about autism and didn't need our input, even though there was an autistic character in her show. V posted a message on social media about what he had experienced, and I reached out to him to tell him that I would go and pick him up the next day. The next day, I drove for 8 hours and helped him pack up his belongings and loaded into my car. We then drove to the next town where he had booked us rooms in a hotel so that we could have a safe return journey. We agreed that we both take a few hours to recover in our respective hotel rooms, and then we would go for some dinner. We went to a bar grill and enjoyed a meal with no alcohol. As we left the grill to return to my car, I noticed an RCMP car across the street from us. V needed some pain medication, and we had been told the only thing open in the town at this time was a gas station. As we were trying to find the gas station, the RCMP car drove behind us and started to flash their lights. I safely pulled over and waited for the RCMP officer to come to our car. He asked me whose car this was, and I knew straight away that he had checked my license plate, etc. This had made me feel at ease, as I can answer this question easily. The car is under my wife's name. He then told us that we had been driving suspiciously, which I must admit we probably were, because we were lost in the town I'd never been to before, and I had not memorized the downtown map yet. We quickly told him that we were lost, that V needed pain medication, and that the servers and the girl had told us to find a certain gas station. The officer helped us with directions and wished us a good evening. Although the officer was totally professional, I was still anxious with the exchange, especially as I had driven a long distance that day. What I didn't realize that V was stimming and very anxious. He told me that he had previous encounters with the police and they had not been pleasant. And when they're close, his anxiety was heightened. I understood that, although I had previously internally rehearsed interactions with the police, V had not, and that his anxiety and stimming could have caused a serious problem with the police officer who had thought we were acting suspiciously. In this situation, I am in no way blaming the RCMP officer. They were completely calm and professional, but I can now see that there could have been a dangerous escalation. I have had very little interaction with the police since I moved to Canada 20 years ago, but I've had to rehearse social interactions or scripts many times just in case of this eventuality. In truth, I basically research and prepare for every social or professional interaction. Even with friends and family, I go through various conversational scenarios to be prepared before I enter the interaction. I admit that this confused a good friend of mine. He thought that this is what everybody did. Perhaps there's some neurodiversity there as well. My wife is sometimes nervous to travel with me outside the country because I can get very nervous talking to border control officers and often do not understand what their questions mean. For example, at our most recent trip to New York, I was asked, "Where are you coming from?" I answered, "We had just had breakfast in the terminal." My wife called out from the other side of the checkpoint that we were from Calgary. I had answered the question literally. I didn't understand the context switch. When I rehearse these interactions, I know that the authority figures want to know, for example, from which city or area that I'm traveling. But in the moment, I will first think of the literal answer. Even though I've traveled around the world and have visited many, many airports, I'm still very nervous when approaching these interactions. For adults on the autism spectrum, especially those of us who have lesser regular support needs, we need to be prepared for interactions with authority figures. We need to be prepared, and we need to gently teach those in authority how to deal with us. As an example of some ideas to consider, I will use the example of my recent interaction with the RCMP. Always keep in mind that the police are doing their job and mean you no harm. This is always a basic start to any interaction with any authority figure. I want to acknowledge here that I am raising some intersectionality problems. I completely acknowledge that there are many communities that have had historically bad relations with the police and other authority figures. I'm referring to members of the BIPOC community and the LGBTQ+ community specifically, and the people affected by the negative impact of neoliberalism. I humbly acknowledge that there have been historical problems between the police force and these groups, and that will continue to be a problem. And I'm certainly not defending the police totally here at all. I don't have a solution for this major social problem other than to suggest open and honest dialogue and empathy from all sides. If we are to live in a civilized and fair country, we must always start with the idea that the police are acting for our own and others' protection. I understand that this could be problematic, but we must start from a place of mutual understanding and respect. Always assume competency, just as we ask that everyone assumes our competency. Also, don't forget that you have legal rights within any interaction with the police. I am certainly not a lawyer, but it would be a good idea to perhaps read the document the Canadian Civil Liberties Association publishes on their website, and I'll put the link with the PDF. Center yourself. Anxiety or anxious moments are part of our shared experience. When we are not in control of a situation, or in a new or relatively new situation, other feelings of anxiety start to appear. This is normal. This is okay. We have to allow ourselves to feel and respond to stimuli in a way that is comfortable for our own minds and bodies. In moments of anxiety, stimming will probably increase. Again, this is okay. An interaction with an authority figure is going to be a little scary. What I would suggest here is to find many ways to center yourself to help navigate these situations. For example, I follow a Zen Buddhist path at the moment. Just breathing helps me by being completely aware of my breath and my body. This is the historical basis of mindfulness as a Buddhist practice. Other examples to help you in these sort of situations would be stimming or fidget tools, of course. Perhaps recalling a calming image or moment in your life. Another idea might be to focus on a part of your body, say for example your left foot, and think about exactly how your foot feels. Is it hot or cold? Is it sore from being inside a shoe? Are your toenails too long? I am a big proponent of getting action cards printed to be stored in your wallet. On the card, print some text such as, "My name is Bruce Petherick, I'm autistic, and sometimes have problems with verbal communication when I'm anxious." Use whatever text would work for you. I would calmly give this to the officer, perhaps after first responding to their first question, for example, showing my driver's license, along with the card. Again, I understand that some people don't feel comfortable with sharing their neurological differences with others. I wish we lived in a world where everyone could be comfortable with sharing this sort of information. And I'm striving to make this world a place where neurodiversity is completely accepted by everyone. Until then, consider this idea and make your own mind up. We all have shutdowns during anxious times. For me, the most outwardly apparent behavior change is that sometimes I lose my verbal ability. To help me through these times, I have a wonderful app on my phone's front page. I always have my phone with me. The idea is to start the app and then hand it to the person with whom you're interacting. The app tells them that you're having problems with verbal communication, but you can communicate via the app, which works similar to texting. Practice using this app or something similar with someone you trust in a safe space before using it in public. I use an app called Emergency Chat that was developed by an autistic software engineer. Here is a picture of the opening screen. This app is available for iPhone and Android users. There are of course other apps available. This is just the one that I use. Rehearse interactions. The most common interaction with the police would be the traffic stop. In a safe space, go through the steps that you would go through for a traffic stop. What's the first thing they're going to ask you? For your driver's license? If you're not in your home province, the officer's going to notice that. Where is your home? They also might want to see registration and insurance information. Where is that? Where do you keep it in your car? Make sure you know where all these documents are. Practice how to tell somebody that you're autistic and what special needs you require. I tend to practice this script, or at least the outline, every time I'm driving. According to Dr. Peter Vermeulen, autism can be seen as context blindness. That is, a difficulty working what several stimuli mean in context when presented simultaneously. Working on scripts such as these will help give us this context and hopefully help us through the social interactions. If at all possible, normalize the interaction. If you see a police officer outside, not currently chasing a crook, talk to them. Tell them you're autistic and ask about their job. and how they would react to asking an autistic person about something. I've always found that people love being asked about their work, especially if they work in the public. Trying to see both sides of this interaction is important. I thought I would give you an example of a possible script dealing with a traffic stop by a police officer. I'm going to use the experience with the RCMP officer as a framework, but we have to remember that these sort of scripts are only suggestions, and the actual interaction could differ from what we have prepared. The order of questions could change, or some questions may not be asked at all. The positive side of this is that we have had some preparation, so the experience will not be totally foreign and anxiety-inducing. Please feel free to use this script for yourself, but please make sure that you use your own language and phrases. You will feel more comfortable and confident in using your own words. I'm also going to assume that in this script I am not close to a shutdown. Preparing yourself for shutdowns is a topic for a completely other presentation. A note. As I was growing up in Australia, it wasn't mandatory to stay in your own car when an officer approached your vehicle. That situation has changed in Australia, and is definitely the case here in Canada and the rest of North America. Stay in your car unless the officer directs you otherwise. Also, make sure you turn your car off. This will almost always be the first question. Make sure you know where your papers are. In some provinces, an insurance record is also needed. An officer will look up your license plate before approaching the car, so they already know the answer to these questions. They're making sure that you know the answer. They will also be checking your car to make sure it is mechanically fit. They will be looking out for broken lights, smashed side mirrors, or any physical defects. And in this situation, our car, is registered under my wife's name. Make sure you know to whom the car is registered. There will always be a question about drinking, and now in Canada also about recreational drug use. Be honest always. An officer can request a further medical test if they suspect you are impaired in any way. Trust the process. Again, be honest. In my case, I was lost, and I can understand why somebody thought I was acting suspiciously. A police officer will most often know much more about their own town, and are usually very happy to help with directions. Be polite. In your script, don't forget to finish with a reminder to recover. These interactions are stressful and drain our spoon levels. Remind yourself that this is okay to feel drained after going through such a conversation, and that you need to center yourself again. Use whatever techniques you need, a short conversation with a trusted friend, a decent stim session, or even a retreat to your favorite safe space. We have an invisible disability, or if you prefer another term, an invisible neurological difference from the average population. We are all striving to be more accepted for this difference, and for our existence to be normalized, but we also have to recognize that we live in a society that is not built to accommodate us all of the time. We need to do preparation work for many social interactions and some research. This will slowly change, but we all have to help in manifesting the change. Thank you for listening to my presentation. If you have any questions or suggestions, please feel free to email me. Thank you.
Are you dealing with a new diagnosis? Do you have questions about autism? Are you looking for resources or support in your area? Autism Canada's Family Services team is here to help. You can connect with them at 1-800-983-1795, extension 1, or by emailing info@autismcanada.org.
Questions au sujet de l'autisme? Vous cherchez des ressources du soutien dans votre région? Nous sommes ici pour aider. Veuillez communiquer avec nos représentantes du soutien à la famille au 1-800-983-1795 ou info@autismecanada.org.
Show us you're awesome. Introducing Nico Baffa, a 14-year-old who is on the autism spectrum. Nico absolutely loves to play the piano and can play a song using only his ear as he has perfect pitch.
Montrez-nous votre awesome. Nous vous présentons Nico Boffa, un enfant de 14 ans qui est sur le spectre de l'autisme. Nico aime jouer du piano à l'ouïe sans utiliser de partition de musique. Quel talent!
Sam and Anthony Holness, Raising Autism Awareness Through Sport.
La sensibilisation à l'autisme par le sport.
Probably the first autistic triathlete to compete in the Ironman World Championships, Super Sam Holness is a 28-year-old endurance athlete with autism spectrum disorder from South London. Sam is committed to become the first professional Black triathlete with autism to compete in the 70.3 Ironman World Championships in Kona, Hawaii. Sam recently completed the 70.3 World Championships in Utah in September. Sam's story is one of persistence, hard work, and advocacy, and it is sure to inspire everyone who hears it.
Probablement le premier triathlète autiste à concourir au championnat du monde Ironman, Super Sam Holness est un athlète d'endurance de 28 ans souffrant de troubles de spectre de l'autisme du sud de Londres. Sam est engagé à devenir le premier triathlète noir professionnel avec autisme à participer au championnat du monde 70.3 Ironman à Kona, Hawaii. Sam a récemment terminé les championnats du monde de 7.3 dans l'État du Utah. L'histoire de Sam est celle de persévérance, de travail acharné et de la défense des droits. Il est sûr d'inspirer tous ceux et celles qui l'entendent.
My name is Sam Holness and this is my dad. He is my coach, bike mechanic, taxi driver, nutritionist and my friend. Today I want to talk about my goal of raising the awareness of autism through sport and how my career as an endurance athlete will hopefully encourage others like me and from other neurodiverse backgrounds to take up sport. My goal is to become the first triathlete with autism to compete at the Ironman World Championships in Kona, 70.3 World Championships, and the first to become the professional triathlete with autism. I also want to use my sports career to help raise the awareness of autism around the world.
Autism is an invisible disability.
Many times when I go to a race, I may be the only athlete on the spectrum, but I can never tell. I would like to meet more autistic athletes to understand how they train and cope with competition.
There are lots of other autistic triathletes. These include Chris Morgan, I think he's an Australian Olympic rower, Anthony Yanni, basketball in the US, Jessica Jane Applegate, swim in the UK, Michael Jackson, who has been on one of Autism Canada's events before, and John Howard is a mixed martial arts fighter. I think John only was diagnosed at 33 years old. So how do we get into sport? I'll just briefly tell you this, and then Sam can tell a bit more about himself. So I'm not a coach by profession. Sam was not a youth athlete. He had to learn to swim, cycle, and run. And the running is really important, and the cycling, because you think you don't have to learn to run, but if you're going to be at the top level, you have to learn to run. And Sam's motor skills were weak when he was younger, and we've had to develop those. It's taken longer, but we're getting there. You only started running park runs, wasn't it? Yeah, 5K park runs?
Yeah, it was park runs.
Yeah, in 2011.
Yeah, in Richmond Park.
And he did his first triathlon, long distance, half distance triathlon in Portugal, in Cascais in 2019. That was swimming in the sea. What was that? 1.9 kilometers swim?
It was, yes. 1.9 kilometers swim, 90K on a cycle, and a half marathon.
Wow. Then we also were fortunate enough to get Sam to university, where he did a degree in sports science. And after university, there were a lot of jobs for him because he was on the spectrum, but he was getting better at triathlons and sports. So we thought, why not? Let's see if we can get him to become a professional triathlete. So Sam could swim, cycle, and run. What we didn't know was that he had the focus to do endurance sports. But we should have known it, because he was pretty focused all the way through his life. He was relentant and determined with most of the things he did. We just probably missed it as parents.
My story so far. I am 28 years old, and I am a triathlete with autism, and I live in the UK. I graduated from St Mary's University with a degree in sports science. I am coached by my dad, who left full-time employment to support me on my journey. I want to inspire autistic, neurodiverse communities to explore their own potential and overcome perceived limitations. In 2020, I was recognized as one of the 100 most influential people with a disability in the UK by the Shaw Trust. I am sponsored by Union sports brands Hoka, Onioni, Hoop, and Cefero. I am an ambassador for the UK charity Ambitious About Autism, and have been presented by the Uranus Academy in Canada. I have competed numerous 10Ks, half marathons, and Olympic and 70.3 triathlon races.
I think there are a couple of things here I just want to highlight, in that Sam's going to university was a lot of hard work. We worked with him every day, the tutors, the university providing support. So it can be done, but it is really, really hard work and requires a heck of a lot of commitment. I gave up my job because when COVID hit, I could have gone back to work. But I thought doing this with Sam was probably the most important thing that I could do. And the best part of it has been so rewarding. I think the other big part of this that was really surprising to me, but we're just pleased for, is that the three companies, Hoka, Onioni, Hoop, and Cefero, some you may or may not know, is a billion-dollar Canadian company. Hoop is a UK wetsuit manufacturer, and Hoka, Onioni make running shoes. These organizations have invested in Sam through bikes, clothing, so he can actually do his sport, and occasionally paid for some of his trips and his races as well. So I think without them, it's not possible. I think the message I want to give here is that it's not just about doing a 9-to-5 job anymore. We take the risk by doing something as an outliner, by putting Sam into sport as a triathlete. He loves it, but the other good thing is that if it motivates others to do sport, then we've more than actually, done our job. And the last thing is about the charity Intermission about autism. They've been so supportive in sharing Sam's story with the UK and the rest of the world about Sam's journey and what he's doing.
I was also non-verbal until I was 6 years old, and then ride the bike until I was 40, so it's never too late. I could swim before I could talk. I am still challenged when I communicate with people and during new situations. Before I became a triathlete, I did trampolining, archery and judo. I decided to tackle the world's toughest and most inspirational endurance sports because I wanted to use sport to raise the awareness of autism and because I wanted to get healthier.
So, the story is, 3 years old, Sam could swim. And it was quite interesting. We were at the pool and there's a swimming coach there and he saw Sam. I think like all parents, we were so worried about Sam. So we put him in arm bands and body flotation aids. And the best thing is Sam had no fear. He went straight in the deep end and was paddling up and down. I remember Carl saying to us, I can teach him to swim in an afternoon without any of the aids. And we were really scared. And I just had a bet with him. I said, if you can teach Sam to swim in the afternoon, I'll book 10 lessons. And we shook hands on it. And Sam learned to swim without any aids in an afternoon because at that age, he was entirely fearless. But we would never have known if Carl didn't actually raise that challenge. And about Sam's autism, it's really about communication skills. Still challenged by new situations. I mean, what you'll see later in the video, you hear about Sam doing a triathlon has taken, 28 years to get here. It's not happened overnight. Everything about putting on a wetsuit, going into the sea, crowds of people around him and noise. We've had to, not say we've overcome them, but I think with triathlons and races, Sam wants to compete so much that he can shut out all of those issues around noise and people and just focus entirely on the race when he's actually doing it. The other thing I'd say is that Sam, you got a brown belt in judo, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And we probably will go back after COVID subsides to try and get Sam to get a black belt in judo as another, another thing that he can do. But I just have to say to you, when Sam was 14, so to his late teens, we didn't know that he'd be able to do sport. It's just happened very, very late that it's actually occurred.
In September 2021, I became the first known person with autism to race at the 70-point World Championships in Utah. There's a picture of me swimming in a reservoir. The second one shows me cycling in the hot sun and me running in West.
Why don't you show everyone your medal, Sam?
And that's me received them, and that's my medal that I received during the race.
Was it
after the race?
Yeah.
Every day I train, eat, sleep, and then repeat. I train between 20 and 30 hours per week. A hard day involves a 3-hour bike ride on my indoor turbo trainer followed by a 20-kilometer run. Each week I swim around 20 kilometer, cycle for 10 hours, and run 40 kilometer plus strength and conditioning. Friday is my rest day, where I do as little exercise as possible. I'm up for 2 hours each day between workouts to 8 recovery. I cook my own breakfast lunch and dinner. Nutrition is important because I have irritable bowel syndrome. My favorite meal is chicken wings, gluten-free spaghetti, and vegetables with a milkshake. Each night I do 1 hour of yoga and planks and stretching before I go to bed. When I'm not training, I play computer games and read Harry Potter books.
So what's your favourite Harry Potter book, Sam, so far?
My favourite's got to be The Chamber of Secrets.
Yeah? Is that also your favourite Harry Potter movie?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yes.
What's the best thing about Chamber of Secrets?
Yes. What's my best part of Chamber of Secrets? My favorite one is the in the writing on the wall.
Writing on the walls, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you enjoy Harry Potter books?
Yeah.
What book are you up to now?
I'm currently at The Goblet of Fire.
Yeah. Which number is that?
Number 4.
Number 4. Okay.
CNN Sport kindly made this video about me.
Sam Holness is a young athlete with a dream to compete at the famous Kona Ironman in Hawaii and to change perceptions of what autistic people are capable of. Sam is 27, learnt to swim before he could talk, and with the help of his parents, particularly Dad, Anthony, has been a triathlete since 2016.
I'm excited about triathlon. It's like my job and my occupation. What I like about it is the 3 disciplines, the swim, cycle and run, and the best part, the all the medals.
What are you thinking when you're competing with all these other triathletes alongside you?
I feel like I can beat them. So if they try to catch up to me, so if they get away, it's just like, come on, get going, catch up to them.
Rather than a disability, Sam calls his autistic diagnosis a personal determination and says it helps rather than hinders.
Every time I do sports, autism it's been building up my confidence, self-esteem, and it reduces my stress and boredom.
Is it true that you call autism your superpower?
It is a superpower.
Which is why this lover of Disney and comic book films has been nicknamed Super Sam Holness. Anthony has retired to dedicate himself fully to his son's career. They call each other Timon and Pumbaa from Sam's favourite movie, The Lion King.
Just take risks, that's what life's about. It's about enjoying it, and he enjoys it, so we support him.
How proud of him are you?
He's my hero, I think, is the way I always explain it to people. I know he's my boy, but he's incredible. I love him so much.
Normally, Sam can be found running or riding around Richmond Park in West London. He likes the independence of getting there and back himself. With an IQ over 75, Sam doesn't qualify for the Special Olympics, and he's ineligible for the Paralympics because he has no physical impairment. So he competes in regular triathlon events, although he's usually the only black autistic competitor.
I just think there are no icons. There's nobody like Sam, for example, who looks like them, who they can point to and say, wow, look at that guy, I want to be like him. So that's sort of where Sam sits. Hopefully we can encourage, more people from, the BAME community to join in, and people who have disabilities start doing triathlons. It's been great for Sam, it really has.
Now they have their sights set on the Kona Ironman, a grueling 2.4-mile swim, 112-mile bike ride and full marathon run in the heat of Hawaii. Super Sam Holness setting out to race and to change the way we think about what autistic people can achieve. Alex Thomas, CNN.
It's Pumbaa. It's like he's a warthog and I'm a meerkat.
So just for me, Sam says I'm bike mechanic, taxi driver, coach. I do. a lot of things to support him and to make life easier for him as an athlete. And I managed training plans. And I think the training plans, I used to tell Sam what to do, but increasingly, I mean, he's the guy with the sports science degree. We work together. We have a very democratic approach to how we do Sam's planning. Increasingly, you do your own plans and choose what exercises you're going to do, don't you? Yeah. And, I made a decision. I had a choice of going back to work in the corporate world or giving up work and retiring early to support Sam. And there really wasn't a choice for me. It was a very easy choice and probably one of the best choices I've made in my life. It's so rewarding. Our goals are simple. We want to motivate others with autism and their families to engage in sport. And that's globally. Once we race at our World Championship in Kona, we've already done the World Championships in Utah. Maybe in 2022, we can do the World Championships in Europe before we go to Kona. And then after that, it's up and away to try to get Sam to become the first autistic professional triathlete in the world. And it's about having a lifelong career in sports, Sam, isn't it? Be a long distance swimmer.
Yeah.
And a trail runner as well. Yeah.
Oh.
And to become self-sufficient. I think that's the goal of all parents and all people on the spectrum with ASD. And coaching Sam is so rewarding. I'm not a coach, but I think he's the best athlete out there, the best sort of athlete that any coach would actually need. And my reasons behind that are fairly simple. The things I've learned. So communication is key, and that's in any profession that any coach or any teacher will tell you. But for Sam, because of his communication challenges, it's significantly more important. Sam needs a coach who's close to him and can work with him on a regular basis, not a virtual coach online. We found that a lot of coaches speak fast, far too fast. There's too much banter going on. And Sam learns visually as well. I think the main thing we learned about coaches and coaching is that not enough coaches are trained to coach athletes on the spectrum. That's a big gap in the market, and a big challenge that needs to be addressed. We also think that schools and coaches have low expectations of athletes with autism. I also think there are a lot of athletes out there, great athletes who are on the spectrum, who either not been diagnosed or don't want to say they're on the spectrum because of the stigma associated with it. I think for me, the last couple of things in terms of coaching an athlete or a child or adult with autism is that giving clear and precise instructions and to speak slowly and clearly. I mean, it may seem obvious, but it's not always obvious to most of us. It's not been easy. So we've been to ed sites and speech and language therapists, physios, the whole gambit. I've dealt with Sam's autism. But one of the problems is the school he went to set low expectations for Sam. So we challenged head teachers, health professionals, everybody to try and get, to get help with Sam's autism. And in addition, in the UK, boys from Black Caribbean backgrounds, a lot of them excluded from school. I think what's happening in the system is they don't recognize autism or ADHD and the behaviors and just excluding them rather than actually guiding them and looking for that special gift and nurturing it. And because of these sorts of issues, perceptions in schools as well, Sam's chances of success were even more challenging. And we just had to fight hard as parents to overcome it. Sam, why don't you tell the story about what happened at school for the swimming gala?
During the swimming gala in school years, when the teacher who was to participate in the swimming gala, I put my hand up, and when I saw my hand raised up, they were like, "Can someone swim?" Answer: I have been swimming when I was about 3 years old.
And I think the school didn't recognize that Sam was one of the best swimmers in the school. And that happened at around 14, They probably had lots of swimming galas that he missed. And I think it's that sort of opportunity that sometimes schools miss, but also because they're not trained to see it, I'm not blaming them, I'm just saying we need to actually try and change the system. So we talked about some of the goals, and I think the main reason that we were driven to push Sam into sport was not one because he couldn't get a job, because they're not employing a lot of people on the spectrum. I think only 60 to 20% of adults on the spectrum have full-time jobs in the UK, and a lot of those are volunteering. And I think only 7% of graduates on the spectrum with autism have full-time jobs. But it was to do with health. The life expectancy in the UK for adults on the spectrum is significantly lower than those who are neurodiverse. But what we also learned is that the illnesses that the adults on the spectrum had were curable. They were obesity related, because we know how fussy and difficult, I don't know what the right word is here, adults on the spectrum can be about food. I mean, Sam's had challenges with food all his life. And without sport, he may have been eating more junk food, I think, actually. But we wanted Sam to live a long and productive life. And since the commitment to sport, his diet has changed. He's much healthier. And we hope, he should have, a normal lifespan of someone who's neurodiverse. And I think the other thing is about racing and being a professional triathlete. It's not a bucket list. This is a career, a life choice. This is what he's going to do as long as he's healthy for the rest of his life. I think the oldest triathlete's about 87 years old or something like that. So, God willing, if he's 87 and still doing this, we'd be very happy. And that just means he can have a long life career, long-term career as a triathlete, swimmer, and trail runner. So our advice, I'll start and talk about live in the world of the person with autism. I had to adapt to coach Sam, create a loving environment. I know all of us understand this. I'm just telling you things we know. It may sound obvious, but it's not always obvious. Sometimes things take long to explain, so speak clearly and no shouting. Slow down and realize that, you just have to be patient. I've learned that from Sam. Sam has taught me humility. I have so much more to learn from him as well. And I'm so proud to know this young man as an adult and a young man, because, he could have been off, married, 3 children, and I wouldn't have seen him living in another country. So I take this as a privilege to actually get to know this guy. And I think for sports coaches out there, identify talent earlier. There are a lot of children in schools and colleges and high schools who are on the spectrum, who have talent. Look for the talent and nurture it. Don't overlook them because of their disability. And parents, look out for your child's gift. I'm talking about sport. It might be something else. It might be art. It could be anything, but I'm saying talk about sport. If your child has a love of swimming or running, dance, whatever it is, judo, trampolining, nurture it and develop it, because I just think sport's the future. And what's that last thing, Sam?
That's fine. It's never, ever give up.
Never give up. That's what we do. If you fall down, get up and try again.
Don't forget to follow at Sam Holness Try.
Thank you very much, guys.
And thanks, guys. It's been a pleasure meeting. It's been great meeting you.
Hi, I'm Barbara Patton. I'm the Executive Director here at Autism Canada, and I'm coming to you today from the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Thank you for being with us today. The Awesome Conference is a very important event for Autism Canada, and whether you're here for the first time or the 5th time, I'm glad you were with us. If you have any questions or comments after the event, please email us at info@autismcanada.org. I'd like to thank our impressive lineup of speakers for today. Our keynote speaker was Wanda Deschamps, and the rest of the incredible list was Kieran, Kim and Sara, Bruce, Minni, William, Michael, and Sam. I'd also like to thank our sponsors for the day. Without them, we wouldn't have been able to bring the event to you. Our presenters were the British Columbia Government Employees Union, Cormark Securities, Public Label, Novotech, The Daily Hive, and Rangam. And last but not least, I'd like to thank the Autism Canada team, who is led by Julie Perkis, for putting this event on for us. I hope you join us next year. Have a great rest of your weekend, and thanks for being with us.